Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Finance Commission meeting of Thursday, November 2nd. We are conducting this meeting mostly in the Finance Commission meeting room at Town Hall, but we do have one member, Ann Haley, who is participating remotely. So the first order of business is approval of the minutes from our meeting of October 19th. Is there a motion?
I'll motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Sarah. Seconded by Kelly. Any discussion?
I assume these are the amended minutes we're talking about?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I need to do a roll call vote. Anne? You're muted, but I think you said yes.
Yes,
Okay. Alan?
Yes.
you read my lips.
Kelly?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay. The next item on our agenda is a discussion and vote of the capital outlay plan and proposed financing. As you know, there are several items on the capital outlay plan. Is it 18? Is that the right number? And so I think it is important for us to talk about each one of these and then take a vote on how, what action FinCom would like, what recommendation FinCom would like to make to town meeting. Let's see, let me count. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 items that fall under general government and schools and things like that, but that are not water and sewer, I think is.
General fund.
Yeah, general fund. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you very much. Okay. So perhaps we should, let's just go down the list. The first item is the airport runway, an amount of $38,500 with a recommendation to use free cash to finance that. Is there any discussion on that one?
That's where there's we're paying about 10%.
Right. This is seed money really to help get a grant.
Is this the one that has the $4,500 extra that we're just gonna find in
Yeah, we'll figure
operations?
it out.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Similar to the operating budget, if we kept making adjustments, we'd be making them up to town
Nope,
meeting.
I get it.
Okay. And then let's just talk about the airport fence at the same time. I believe that's $140,000. Also with a recommendation for free cash for that one. All right. Any discussion about that?
Will this one also be, sorry,
Go ahead.
will this one also be part of reimbursement from the government or not?
Yes, it is. This is the first of 2 phases, and this is our 10% match, so the federal government's paying 90% of the project.
That's one heck of a
Okay.
fence they're putting up.
Well, it's a pretty big area.
Yeah,
It's
And
4
through a
miles.
wetland.
Fair enough.
Is the state picking up any portion of this? Sometimes in the past, some
They
of the
sometimes
grants
throw
they
in
have.
5%.
Yeah.
They're likely not on these ones. They just move their 5% around. They had a grant 2 years ago
Okay.
that they effectively picked up 100% of between the state and the federal government, so they're just sort of
Okay.
giving us our comeuppance on that.
Good, okay.
So I think maybe we should maybe eventually take a vote on both of these items together, but maybe it also makes sense for us to just have a little bit of a conversation about free cash. The proposal before us, we have draft pink sheets that, let's
Right
see.
there.
Okay, thank you. It's like, I know I had that at one point. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Okay. So, we are starting with a little over $12.9 million in free cash. There are requests for about $3.9 million in other articles at town meeting that we'll be talking about later tonight. And then capital projects of 2.7 million. So if all of these items are approved, although this number doesn't actually match with the number I had. If all of these items are approved, according to this, the new free cash balance would be 6.3 million, but I have 6.151 million. Wonder where the disconnect is.
We'll
See
have
if
to
I-
check the number.
Maybe something was reduced in the capital outlay plan.
That's what I'm trying to figure out. All right, let's see.
Is that 150 that I did today?
That's what I'm wondering. Yes. That is the 150. The 1-ton dump truck, is that included in the capital outlay plan and free cash?
I have to get the capital plan folder. Does somebody have a spare copy of the plan? We'll put a few out.
The one dump truck is included in the capital plan for $150,000.
So I don't believe that is included in this pink sheet number that is coming before us.
In the operating budget.
Can,
Oh, it's in the operating budget?
you don't have it?
Oh, so that's why the $150,000 wasn't included, because the operating budget has already funded it. Okay.
Okay.
So we just need to correct page 12 of the capital outlay plan, right? Because if that's where, or maybe not, okay.
Okay. Let me just zero out this number. Okay. So now that all lines up, good. Okay. As we discussed before, we also are looking ahead to what might happen in our needs in the spring. Tony had put, let's see, if we were to go forward with this plan and want to keep debt service level, we would need to spend $341,000 of free cash to offset the extra debt service that's being proposed. We've talked about potentially $2.5 million because that's what we're seeing now as the budget deficit. Just in the forecast, it's a very rough number. And then possibly around $1 million in needs for special town meeting expenses in the spring, snow and whatever else might come before us, school, like technology, things like that usually come up before us. And then, so that would bring us down to about $2.4 million at the end of May. But then this plan, as we've been talking about, that one of our goals was to keep debt service pretty much level over time, and in order to do that, we would not be able to borrow anything next year for capital outlay. But the current capital outlay plan calls for about $6.8 million in spending next year. Obviously, that can always be changed as time goes on, but that's our basic projection at this point. We are hopeful that free cash will be a healthy number again next year. We have seen at least $7 million in large building permits come in already this fiscal year. So that's encouraging, but it's still pretty early in the year, and it's possible that there'll be some things other areas where revenues come in lower than anticipated. So that's just to set the stage to kind of talk about this. Are there any comments or questions about free cash and things like that? Kelly?
So I have a question and then a comment. Is there a reason why we can't bring the Forbes balance down further and fund some of the capital items from there?
We could. The plan had been to use some of the Forbes money to offset what we otherwise use as free cash, and then put that free cash into stabilization and override stabilization. I'd rather use that next $2 million of Forbes in next year's capital plan, only because remember, us using proceeds to fund capital projects is unique. As I said, the state doesn't normally have situations where towns profit this level. I'd rather do it in 2 years. I'm willing to give it a shot to do it all in one, and town council will write us a letter saying it's all legitimate, but I know DOR is gonna look at it very closely and I would rather do that over two capital years than in just one capital year.
Okay, so here's my overall concern, right? We have this windfall of almost $13 million, 12.9 million. But at the end of the year, we're projecting to only take about 2.6 million away. So that's like 1/6 of what we took in. And that causes me great concern because I feel like we have an opportunity here to pad our override stabilization fund to protect us from the potential for another override for a couple of years by taking additional cash and that free cash and putting it in there. And that's my concern. I think we're saving too little of what we're taking in this year.
Sure. So just a couple things on that. One, in terms of the amount remaining, even if it's all the way down to that $2.4 million number, that's more than we normally have by quite a bit to close the year out.
But so is this. So everything's relative, right? That's a fair point, but it's also fair. 2 million that we're keeping, we made 12 million. We've never made 12 million before.
Correct,
So
but we're still closing with a significant amount, and that includes putting $2 million into override stabilization. Now, we'll likely be using that in next year's fiscal budget, but that's already putting $2 million into override stabilization. You also can leave it in free cash. Remember that, it can stay in free cash. Override stabilization is fine to put money in and out of. We've made it clear with our financial advisors that's just sort of a holding account, if you will. They don't love the term in the process, but we've at least sold it with them over the years. Any money you were to put in regular stabilization, you should only put in if you assume you're not going to take it out for a number of years.
I mean, that again, I agree that this is more than we typically save, and I totally understand that. But we made $13 million. We're saving less than 3. That's less than 25% of what we've
No,
made.
3.5 million is going into fund balances, and right off the bat.
Although that is true, but
To fund our expected budget
the
deficit for next
Forbes
year.
money, we had voted to put that $2 million into override stabilization a year ago. So,
Correct. Yep.
so doing it now, it doesn't feel like we're doing a new thing. We're just
Yep.
trying to finish the thing that we got hung up on before.
Sure.
Yep.
So it's really only taking $1.5 million of this windfall and putting it into like a long-term use.
Which is compensated absences, which is great. I support that. I think it's great. I don't want to see us get ahead of our skis. We have the money now. We expect to be drawing down the override stabilization fund balance to compensate for a deficit. I feel like we should put more in there so that we cover ourselves for a year or two.
So just so everyone is aware, I am sharing up here on the screen the kind of worksheet showing like the things that we're talking about and this expenses and things like that, and then the projected numbers. The balance after town meeting would be this number here, and then this is our projection of what we might have in May.
Right, can I just interject real quick?
Sure.
Included in these numbers, that $2.5 million to possibly balance the budget, if we're using that and override
That's
stabilization.
4.5 million, I was just.
Yeah,
Right, that's a
right.
lot of money.
That's significant. So that 2.5 million, I just threw it as let's say it's the worst possible case scenario. So we really are looking at only turning 2.4 million over in a heavy recession that hits us. Using that full 4.9 million to offset, it would be 5.4 million to offset the budget is insane.
No, I definitely would not be in favor of 4.5 million to offset the budget, but honestly, I think if we need 2.5 million to offset the budget, I would rather take it from free cash and let that extra $2 million continue to sit in override stabilization.
Oh, I agree. So in that case, if we use that 2.5 million, we'll still have 2.9 million
Right.
in override stabilization, which will be quite a significant buffer going into the following
So
year.
essentially what that means is that if you put $4.5 million into override stabilization, essentially, under this proposal, and you still have, and you're putting $1.5 million into compensated absences, and essentially we put almost half the money away.
We're not
at the
talking
same
about
time.
putting that much amount into override stabilization.
It's-
We're only talking about putting $2 million into override stabilization, and that's really just from the Forbes money
That has
that
nothing
we
to do
had
with the
planned
windfall,
to
yeah.
do last year.
Yep, so it has
Well-
nothing to do with the free cash.
Right, but we're projecting
But under, if you look at the warrant, we're putting $2 million into override stabilization.
Yes.
Okay, and now you're saying, in the spring, we're gonna put another $2.5 million
No.
to balance the budget, which is essentially the same thing.
Oh, I see what you're
That's fine.
saying.
That's
Whether
fair.
we formally put it into override stabilization, just in our minds, we say, okay, we've got a buffer going into next year. Candidly, as a representation of town meeting, I'd rather say, yeah, we had a lot of free cash, so it always makes sense to use some to balance the budget. And the override stabilization fund is gonna last another year, because then next year we can say, guys, we balanced the budget 7 years of we made our override match. Are we kind of playing a little moving money around game? A little bit, but then the override stabilization we're drawing from the following year. I think that's a great idea. We can't predict what's gonna happen in May, but again, 2.5 million is a solid buffer, even if we had to take an additional million out of override stabilization, which again, you're looking at an offset of the budget of 3.5 million, which is substantial. That's gonna have to be a real conversation about what the heck are we
Absolutely.
spending on if we have to offset that much. We still have, in that case, $2 million going into the following year.
Right.
With the ability to probably throw $1 million or $2 million of free cash at the following year too. So even towns in great financial shape, and we're in good shape, are rarely looking at 2 years of potential budget stability.
Right. But I do think that you raise a good point of talking about, what's happening next year. And that is one area where I am frustrated that we as a committee had hoped that we would be able to start the budget balancing process over the summer, that we would make a lot of headway, that we would have had a good conversation among the three major boards about, now that the override pledges come to an end, what replaces it? How are we going to constrain the budget growth going forward? Are we going to come up with some percentage that we're all going to agree to? Are we going to come up with some new split formula that's different than what we had before? And for various reasons, many of them very good reasons, that conversation has been delayed. But the fact that we have not yet agreed to a system and not yet really looked at the forecast and I know we have a draft of a forecast, but we haven't really vetted that. We haven't really had that conversation. So it does give me pause in terms of like, how much are we committing going forward at this time when we don't yet have those numbers. That's still something that's out there. I mean, we are aware that most of our union contracts are going to be up for renegotiation starting in FY25. That's a big unknown. And so there's a lot of things that are still up in the air, and I don't feel confident that we have a good view of the horizon.
Sure, but in the projections we've made an allowance for that, and while you don't know where it's ultimately gonna settle, we know that the all-in labor cost in a given year generally is not going up 9%. You're gonna look at a COLA for most units of 2 to 3%. Top line, no, don't want any of the unions to think that that's necessarily what they're getting, but that's generally gonna be your biggest increase, and then sometimes upwards of maybe 1% or 1.5% in other areas. So we've projected, I think, 4.5% for the general government budget and the school budget. So that calculation includes a fair amount of what that contractual obligation will be. We didn't just do an estimate for step increases. We said, this is roughly about 3%
yes.
COLA. So it may be 1% higher and it's our biggest cost category, but that's somewhat built in.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna get a little bit more refined as we go along, but having said that, as you know, one of the concerns I've always had is putting free cash into the budget to balance the budget. We did that previously. It was only in the range of about $1 million. We were concerned at that point about having, a long-term budget deficit. Putting substantial amounts of free cash into balancing the budget, to me, is nothing more than kicking the can down the road.
So generally, I would agree, in a year where you're not doing $12 million of free cash, it means you took in a lot more and your budget
Yeah,
could have been adjusted otherwise.
I get that, yeah.
If we have $3 million of free cash at the start of the year and we have to use $2.8 million, we have a serious problem. $12 million, you're sort of giving $1 million or $2 million back to the taxpayers.
No, I mean, I get that. However, when you have that amount of free cash, this is where, like Kelly says, you'd like to put it towards more like long-term savings, whether it be stabilization, regular stabilization, compensated absences, or whatever. So
Because you're still giving it back to the taxpayers, just in
yeah,
a
you're
different
still
way.
doing that. I just
Without
have a
raising
real
taxes.
concern about using huge amounts of free cash to balance the budget. I think it just delays the inevitable.
Sure.
The decision that we have to make one way or the other.
That being said, we're not quite there yet.
You know?
Right, and we definitely are not
this year
Not,
anyway.
well, and we're just saying, like, we'd like to make sure we've left at least that much so that we have the flexibility to do it if it actually comes down to it.
Correct.
But we're all hoping it doesn't come down to it and that we're not adding free cash to the budget to make it balance. That's
Right,
certainly
in
the
any
goal.
significant amount.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, anybody want to have any more of a conversation about that before we take a vote on the airport projects?
I would be more comfortable if that was doubled. If we had 2 years and overhead stabilization. That would make me more comfortable. And I have a hard time voting on individual projects because I think they're all valuable. And the capital outlay committee didn't want to prioritize them, which is fine because they're all valuable. So I don't know what to vote for and what not to vote for based on what's of highest priority to that committee.
So can I just-
So part of me will need to vote against everything.
Can I make a comment on that in the prioritization? I know there was some frustration that there was a field capital outlay didn't prioritize. There's a couple of things I want everyone to keep in mind. One is the largest projects on the plan have been on the plan for several years. That's the priority. I can tell you what's not a priority right now. What's in year 5 of the plan? That's one of the reasons it's on year 5 of a plan. So there's already that natural prioritization that's taken place by the projects coming up this year generally, and some things always come up, have already been planned. It was, we need to look at this, we looked at it, we need to design it, now it's time to do it. There's also $2 million in CPA requests this year, a lot of which would be very low priority projects that we'd be kicking off. There's never been a year that we have, and I don't think we would have gone to capital outlay for $100,000 to fix paintings in town hall, $70,000 to replace benches, $10,000 for annual reports. Those are all capital needs of the town. They're not on a plan because if CPA isn't funding them, candidly, they're low priority projects. They're nice things to have. CPA has taken what would have otherwise been a lot of lower priority projects off that we probably still would have been fighting about. The Historic Commission still would have come in here for at least one of them and said it's an important capital project to fix the benches in Memorial Hall. And it is. Benches are a mechanic's truck. The benches just don't sit on them. The mechanic's truck we need to do. So it's the lower priority projects don't actually make it to the list most of the time.
I totally, completely respect that. But there's 18 projects on here, and I'm not comfortable with the total amount of spend. So I need guidance on what are the most critical things that we need to get done right now, so I know where I say, okay, here's the line I won't go past.
So maybe that's a good argument for, let's just continue this conversation about the rest of the capital outlay projects that would be funded from the general fund. I do think it makes sense to talk about
Yeah,
general fund
yeah.
separately from water and
Yeah.
sewer. And then we can come back and take votes. Okay, so the next item is the Savage parking lot. Are there any questions about that?
It's in bad shape, I've seen it.
Yes.
But also, if you had a save project could go another year, the lot's not gonna have a critical failure. I will direct the complaints to somebody else because it's in awful shape. It's not a bridge, it's not an infrastructure system. If something
We
had
have a
to,
number of parking lots on the next year's capital plan, so
Yeah.
if you combine it with those,
Yeah.
I mean,
And the
if you're
traffic
worried
lights.
about pushing things off and having things cost more, I would hope that there may be some economies of scale
there would be,
if we did
in
that.
terms of looking at projects, this, and we can talk about the Washington Street Bridge, anything we kick off is likely to come at a higher cost, both in a couple ways. One, we're gonna see probably 5 to 10% cost inflation. 2, borrowing will continue to get more expensive. We're never gonna be quite at what the market rate is, but over time, municipalities get a little bit closer to that. So you take a $5 million project and you kick it off a year, you're probably looking at $5.5 million. A $500,000 project, maybe it goes up $20,000 or $30,000. That's more livable if we're worried about the cash. The parking lot should get done, it is just kicking the can down the road, but this is a type of project that there's some economies of scale, we're doing more of them, that if we're worried about the cash, we should be doing it. It's a dirt lot more than it's a parking lot, we've all seen it. You could probably get away with it.
I think it's also a matter if we are doing additional parking lots the subsequent year, you could all, put them together into a bundle and more
historically
than
we've done.
likely get a better price than if you're having one out as an individual. Not a guarantee that that's gonna happen, but it's certainly possible. And the other thing is that, as you know, the schools are doing a study of their elementary schools. I have no idea what that's gonna result in, whether it's even gonna impact the Savage, but possibly it could. So until that study is completed, I'd be reluctant to do anything at the Savage lot until we know that that's gonna be, still continue to be a long-term use.
And I also think a lot of what we're talking about is unknown because we don't have a really good idea of what's going to happen. In March, we're going to have a much better picture. So it's not necessarily even saying that we push it off for a full year. it's maybe we reconsider these at special town meeting in May.
If
I know you don't want March because
Yes,
that's.
please
so-
leave March
I know,
alone.
I understand, but if there's timing issues, I mean, I know I'm trying to leave March alone, but if it becomes a timing issue.
This is a project that's
March
easier
and
to
May.
restore, there's less design work than, and there's no timing issue. It's not like the pool, which is complicated because we have to time into the season.
Absolutely.
It's like
Correct,
that.
yes.
This, we know we're gonna do it over the summer, over whatever summer we're able to do it. You could probably even do it over winter. You could probably actually do it while the building's in session. It wouldn't be ideal, but it's not like the old Hammer the Willow lot where it's like, we have to get it timed, we have to get it out to bid, and we have to do it, or else it's not gonna work for us. So I guess I'm agreeing with you that
Yeah.
this wouldn't cause a bigger disruption down the road as long as we accept that generally the longer we wait, the costs go up. This isn't gonna screw anything else up, and I don't think we're gonna be looking at a $900,000 lot, whereas a $3, $4, $5 million project could easily add $1 million.
Okay.
All right. Any other comments on the Savage lot? Okay. Oh, Bob, did you want to say
No,
something?
I'm fine.
Okay. The next one is design of the public safety apparatus floor. We're looking at $75,000 to study the problem and come up with a proposed solution, correct?
Yes, and just for, I know unfortunately those of you on Capital Outlay have heard this 1,100 times, but for everyone who hasn't, it's not just a regular floor, it is a heated floor for the vehicles. It also has a drainage system in it for the chemical separation, and it somewhat connects to the exhaust system, so it's not just a floor in the building, it's sort of a complicated system. This could be a $3,000 look with $2,800 in repairs. It could be a $40,000 investigation with $200,000 in repairs. This is really it's an unknown, but we know that the floor is having some problems.
What's the, no, I support this, but what's the implication if we didn't do it?
At some point in time, if some of those systems start to fail, you could see, I mean, if the drainage system fails, and it's not just a drainage, it's a chemical separation system, you could have an illicit discharge, you could have a backup into the fire station. If there's any structural issues with it, because they seem to feel the floor as they're backing trucks up, if you had a critical failure of the floor, it's not like a regular garage where it's, park your car outside. I mean, picture your own garage. If the floor cracks and it's really bad and it's dipped in a corner, you just park out front. I don't want to park fire engines out front for 6 or 8 months. And again, because
You don't think Shaw's will let you use their parking lot?
it's keeping them warm and ready to go.
Yeah.
If we had to. I mean, short term, while we're working on it, we can do it. So, but again, it is one of those projects that you just don't know. We could pay an engineer $900 to come in and say, yep, we unclogged something, you're good to go. Or it could be $15,000 worth of work of actually have an engineer come in and infrared it and scan it. And then, do we have to pull the whole floor up and redo it? It might come to the point where it's like, well, the heating is broken in the northwest quadrant of the floor. It's $60,000 to repair it or $200,000 for a whole new
It's
floor.
also getting close to 20 years when everything is said and done. you
For a
know.
building that-
That type of building with the amount of use that floor gets, it's
Yeah.
not surprising that there's issues.
Cool.
All right. The next item is the police red dot firearms for.
Oh, you missed mechanic.
Oh, I'm sorry, mechanics truck. Thank you.
And just the only comment in this, I will belabor the point, it's one of those that we probably would never work into the capital budget, because it's only gonna come up every 10 or 12 years as a vehicle, and you can stretch the mechanic truck more than you can a regular work truck.
It sounds pretty miserable for whoever's driving that truck right now from the description, to be
Years
honest.
out of it.
To be honest.
Sarah and I did get to participate in the sort of touch a truck
Yes.
portion of the capital outlay, and
We wouldn't argue with that.
It
Right.
sounds like you can't. It's got a rotted frame. Like,
you can touch it, but you just can't step into
okay,
it
or push it. Okay,
Right.
fair enough.
Listen, when I got to Adams, we were welding stop signs on the bottom of the police cruisers. We can get a little bit more out of this truck, but
All right. Is the next one police red dot firearms?
Yes.
Okay. So that would be $100,000, and as I understand it, this would replace all the ones that are not yet red dot.
That's correct, that's correct.
Yep.
We'd actually be turning in our current firearms in return for firearms that come equipped with that red dot sighting system. It's an
Okay.
expensive system, which is, the last time the police department came to the town for firearms money was 1989. Over the years, we've been able to do this with seized drug gas, we've been trying to do it, a little bit at a time, but these firearms are twice as expensive as the standard firearms. And we did a pilot project with a small number of officers, and that was all good, it worked out very, very well, but right now the department is mixed, and we've got the two systems, and we need to get away from that, and this project will do that.
As I understand the chief, it isn't simply a matter of getting new optics. It's just getting it's a matter of getting new optics as well as new firearms, because the optics can't work on your existing firearms.
That's right, you can't
Okay.
just attach them on existing firearms, you have to actually trade in the ones we have.
Okay.
And buy the ones with the new optic mounted.
Okay.
And I assume this makes them safer and more accurate.
Safer, more accurate, and you know, anytime you're more accurate, the officer has more confidence, and with confidence comes restraint.
Yes.
And that's kind of how we train.
Yeah.
Yep,
That, and so it speaks for itself, that's what we strive to
Yeah.
do.
absolutely.
Anne, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, what do we do with the old firearms, and do we get any money for it?
We do, and that's in the dollar amount, that already takes into consideration, the trade-in on each firearm is about $300 apiece, and that's already figured into the equation. They'll be traded in to the vendor that we're buying the new ones from.
Were you able to hear that answer, Anne?
Yes, thank you
Okay.
very much.
All right. I know I'm right next to the owl, but Chief Brooks is not. Okay. Any other questions on that? The next one is the police tasers for 51,000.
Same thing, just regular
Normal.
replacement of tasers. At some point, this is small equipment that we would want to work into the operating budget.
This makes sense.
How frequently do these need to be replaced?
Well, this is actually, so we did just replace them, this is a move to a leasing system.
Okay.
So this is an annual charge. And what this comes at is brand new tasers, training cartridges, software upgrades, warranty. It's a whole package on a lease basis.
So we
And
are,
what Mr. Mizuko says is correct, to make it, you know, it's a charge that you see from year to year, and it's predictable, and it probably belongs in the operating budget.
so I was gonna say, so the proposal is to use free cash to pay for it this year, but come the following year, that would be part of the operating budget?
So we built into the 5-year projection, knowing that we've got to start adding some small capital in there, but this is one of those examples where a set charge of $50,000-ish a year for one specific item is significant for the operating budget. It would be great to get it in there.
Okay. Just, we've been talking about what are we signing ourselves up for annual costs, and I just want to be
Sure.
aware of that.
But this would replace any equipment costs, Chief Brooks, that we would have to pay today because we buy them outright, right? So this would be a leasing program, someone breaks it, we get a new one. It's not like we have to buy a new.
You don't have to buy a new one.
Yeah.
Already happened, 5 of them break down, whatever, we get brand new ones. We get software upgrades to make them operate properly. It's all the package, they're all guaranteed, warranted.
So there's some savings in the
Sure.
because every year we replace X amount, right? So there's some savings there anyway.
That's right, instead of buying new ones because you had breakages, yeah.
Yep.
No. Okay, is the next item Washington, Ann, did you have a question?
Yes, about 2 years ago, did we get new tasers? I vaguely remember this. I think Judy was on the capital outlay at that point.
Excuse me.
I'm not sure they were capital, but there was a period of time where we would replace X number of tasers every year. Then we would go a couple of years, we wouldn't replace any, then we'd go back and replace more. And so this
Okay.
is a leasing system that gets away from that periodically, buying a whole bunch of tasers and then not finding any tasers and buying a whole bunch more and
Right.
kind of
Okay.
replacing them piecemeal. Because when you do that, you also then have a difference in the model you're using, which then affects how we train you.
Interoperability.
Yeah, so,
We'd also, in a perfect world, pay for a 5-year lease all at once. The state doesn't allow us to do that, so you sort of gotta pick at it year by year. You might remember a couple years ago with software, we were able to do something separate where we could buy software for 5 years or 6
Right.
years, something like that. It would be better to do it differently, but the state doesn't let us do it that way.
Okay.
So I have one last question here on this. And so we are changing all of our tasers now in this
correct.
one?
Yes.
Okay, so it's everything and we're turning in the old ones and, okay, just want to make sure.
But we are signing ourselves up for roughly a $51,000 charge on an annual basis.
Okay, that's what I
It
thought.
removes the cost of maintaining the current
Correct.
fleet
Right.
of tasers.
Right, right. Okay.
You're paying one way or the other.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, the next item is
The
the.
police cruisers are in here, I don't know if we want
Oh,
to
the
talk about
police
that, but
cruisers
that's
are
in
in
the
there,
operating
it's
budget.
funded out of the operating budget, so that was basically approved in May.
Yeah, right.
So I didn't add it on my list.
Fair enough.
Right.
Yeah,
enough.
but no, thank
Fair
you for
enough.
helping me stay on top of this.
Yeah,
Um,
before we go into anything else, is there any other items on here that the chief is interested in so we can get him in and out?
He might want to stick around for the, not the bridge, but the traffic signals discussion.
Do you want to skip to that so we can free cheap books?
I'd really like to get through the cash items
Okay,
and then,
fair enough,
so that we
fair
can
enough.
take one vote on that and then we can move to.
I appreciate Mr. Slater, but I'm happy to be here.
You try to get take something, Alan?
He's guilty of something.
I admit it.
Only because we don't have that many cash items left. So the next one is the Washington Street Bridge for $712,000. This is the
about the
bridge
road
that's in
repair?
front of. Oh, the road repair. That one of the road repairs is.
The road repair program to ask for an additional
Okay.
2.8 million of free cash.
Yeah, I had moved that down later because it also includes
Okay,
Forbes
go
money
ahead.
and stuff like that.
Do that.
So, all right, let's talk about Washington Street Bridge.
Okay,
sorry.
It's the bridge that's in front of the Brookside.
Correct. So $700,000 for a major rehabilitation of the bridge. This is another project that, if you delayed this project a year, you'll probably see maybe a $50,000, maybe a $60,000 cost increase. I wouldn't necessarily recommend delaying it a year. The timing of this with the pool might mean that it's not getting done until next fall. And then if fall kicks into winter, we may not be able to start. So we realistically need to do the project, but if we wanted to wait, we're probably not gonna do it before the pool. And again, the differential is if we do this first and we delay the pool a little bit, and I'm not saying delay approving the pool, but
No,
we
I
start that
understand.
project a few months later, $6 million is gonna escalate a heck of a lot quicker
Fair.
than the $700,000.
Agreed.
So we have to do the pool first. If we run into any construction challenges with the pool, or it just takes time, they can't get labor or whatnot, this is what's gonna be done afterwards. So if you were really interested in waiting till May, not March, but March on something, the
May not
bridge.
March, but March.
I don't think we'll be starting the bridge project prior to May because we have to do the pool project first. So in terms of sequencing, that can probably, I don't wanna say wait, but maybe. And again.
We're not gonna do
$40,000
it
to
right now anyway.
$50,000 versus
Yep.
5.7 or 5 million, those are in,
On the other hand, you know, we could vote the money now, we can get the design done, and then it could go out to bid. So as soon as you're finished with the pool, you know, which is probably gonna be what, May, June?
But your
The pool-
bids don't last long.
yeah, the bids are, bids are usually only good for 30 to 60 days after they come in. So we would have to know that we were approaching the pool being done. The pool
I
might-
mean, you
well,
delay the bids until
The
then.
pool might be, well, right, but I guess just in timing, again, the pool is complicated. We could do this project 8 or 9 months out of the year. The pool starts, we're probably gonna miss a season. If we can't get the pool completely done by Memorial Day, we're gonna miss most of that season. Cause I gotta tell you, if the pool's gonna get done July 29th, we ain't opening for that season.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
in a perfect world, you're right, finish design, get bids and go for it. We may not be doing that until
Yeah.
March or May. We can probably, whatever design Mark still needs to do, if we have to get something done to be ready, between the in-house team and Chapter 90, we can probably start getting it ready. And again, only because if we weren't doing the pool, we'd say, nope, we're going forward with this. It isn't gonna get done till after the pool's getting done, because if we did both at the same time, and we could, we'd be taking up the entire hospital parking lot as well as all the parking on the street. It would effectively kill the Brookside. They'd have 0 parking available if we do both projects at the same time.
Right.
So we're gonna have to sequence them, and because the pool's a pain in the butt with the summer,
So you're saying we
Plus
can,
and?
so you're saying we can defer this one?
Can you stop for a minute?
sure.
Okay, so we are building a school
Yes,
right now.
that's correct.
Right?
That's correct.
And we're talking about starting the pool in the spring?
Correct.
This coming spring, right?
Yeah.
So that's already 2 projects. So why would we even think of having that road done?
That's what he just said.
That's what Tony just said.
So-
No, I know,
If it
but
wasn't- hold on a
I don't
second.
even,
Yeah, if you go to, it's because the project has to get done, and sometimes you have to get a lot of projects done in a certain area. If the Brookside wasn't there, it wouldn't be a problem. I can tell you a restaurant relies on parking in reasonable amounts of distance from
Right.
it. To have
You're
to-
fine there.
Right.
But-
We basically taking up all the parking, which just means they've got to get sequenced, which is fine. It just means we do the pool, and as that's wrapping up, we would start this. However, the timeline for the pool is going to take us to a point where we're probably not starting this project until late summer, fall. So we could probably wait till May, as long as we all understand that that's probably coming with a cost increase. However, a cost increase on the $700,000 bridge is far less significant than what it is on the pool of the traffic signal.
So, a couple of things here. One is, honestly, I was confused when this first came to town, to capital outlay, that it was marked as a medium priority, because Washington Street is a fundamental throughway
Piece of our
through
infrastructure.
Norwood. And we're going to be, as Ann mentioned, we are building a school, but that also means there's a lot of like trucks that are going up and down that road. We're adding to that because of that. So that's an argument to do the bridge now. But I do understand what you're saying about the sequencing, but I also have a question about if we delay the vote until May, I don't see how that changes the cost, because you're telling us that it can't be built until after the pool anyway. So if we're gonna build it at the same exact time, how does that change the cost?
Well, so if we reasonably believe we're gonna delay it, it would change the cost because we're best case scenario, we vote on it in May, and assuming the pool runs on a perfect schedule, we'll be probably doing this in the fall. If it gets delayed, you're looking at the whole next construction season. And that's when you're gonna start to see those project delays.
But it sounds like
But it
what
would be
would
done
potentially be delaying it is the logistics of getting it all done,
Sure.
not when we vote on it at
Yeah,
town meeting.
correct.
Regardless, if we vote on it in November or we vote on it in May, you're gonna do it at the same time.
Correct.
And it's gonna cost the same amount of money.
Bridges are complicated, you're correct. The pool, I mean, again, if we're talking about a project today, it's November 2nd or 3rd, that we're not under construction until next November. I don't know if that bid number is gonna hold.
Yeah,
at
but you
Right.
can't go out to bid
212,000.
anyway until you know you're gonna do it for 30 to 60 days anyway.
Correct.
Right, so it's
we're-
irrelevant.
We're likely going to, and part of it's just because as the pool project continues to move along and finalize its design, they've said they're gonna need the entire lot. Well, if both of these at the same time are gonna take up the parking, if Brookside was not there, we would do both, because it wouldn't really matter.
Right.
It's useless parking. We have a business there that we know
Oh,
is gonna.
don't say useless
All right.
parking. You tried parking up there for soccer or basketball
Well,
now.
but in
Right.
terms
Okay,
of-
don't call it useless
in
parking.
terms of hurting a business, if
Yeah.
there wasn't a business that relied on it there.
Fair, but it impacts the
it'd be different.
community for
But-
sure.
But to Maya's point,
Can
we're not.
Can I ask something here? We're
Sarah.
talking about the problems of doing all of these projects together, okay? So I'm concerned just in doing the pool along with doing the school. So, and I didn't get an opportunity to say that to you before. So, yes, I have a problem with Washington Street being fixed and the pool being fixed and the school. So, but I also have some concerns about the school and the pool at the same time. And I'm going to say one more thing and then I'll keep my mouth shut for a minute. The sidewalks on the Brookside side of that bridge, you need to get somebody down there now and put a little bit of cement in there because it's it's uneven and somebody is going to fall. Thank you.
Thank you. And so-
Sarah, you were, oh, go ahead.
Just a couple of things. I don't think there's money in the budget for a little bit of that concrete, but we'll see if we can dig it out. The middle school contractors and committee don't have a concern about the pool and the middle school going on at the same time. All three projects going on at the same time is feasible, it's possible, except it takes up parking that a business needs to operate. That's what the concern was. Now, the other concern is the reason we would say hold off on the bridge versus the pool, costs always escalate. Whatever, all these costs are gonna escalate. A $5 million or $5.7 million project versus a $700,000 project. If there's a 2% cost escalation, which would you rather see that 2%?
Right,
The
right.
$700,000?
We heard you.
Yeah, we
So
got
we
that.
heard you.
Yeah, yeah.
We
So
heard you.
Sarah, what
I'm
were
just
you?
making sure
It-
that the whole committee hears me.
Yeah, I mean,
Wait a minute, Alan, Sarah got cut off.
I
Can I call on
just
Sarah,
think- I
please?
go back to Maya's point, then I think we could probably move on, but is that us not voting on the Washington Street Bridge tonight is not going to change the cost that we're likely going to incur. You can say it's gonna increase, but if we're not going out to bid till next summer, then it doesn't matter if we vote on it in May. Once we have a better picture of the future and a better picture of next year, hopefully not just next year, but maybe a year or two out, where the Budget Balancing Committee has had time to look at it, vet it, and have some of the discussions that I have referenced at the beginning of this meeting.
Sure.
So,
Alan?
Well, I mean, if there doesn't seem to be much of an interest right now to vote the construction, why don't we just vote the design? Whatever that number is.
It's been
it's
designed.
ready to go.
Most of the design is
It's already done?
Yeah.
There's always some final design that needs to get done, but it's ready to go. And just again, to remember, it's the sequencing.
I get it, I mean, I know what's going on there. Is there also the possibility of getting a grant for this?
We've gotten grants for the last 2 bridges. This doesn't meet the state small bridge grant program. We're still gonna give it a shot, but you know, when they tell you the bridge has to be whatever it is,
Okay.
26 feet long, and it's only
Okay.
23, they usually keep an eye on it, but we'll
Okay.
give it a shot.
Mark Ryan wasn't very hopeful when he talked about it at Capital Outlay. That's
Okay.
why I was surprised to see it in
So
the
do they
memo
think
sheet.
people, like the cars can just jump over a 23-foot gap? I don't understand.
Have you seen Dukes of Hazzard?
Right.
My guess is the state did an analysis of all the bridges, and they said, we've got X million dollars a year, let's pick these parameters of all the bridges in the state, because that's basically what we think we can give most of the grants out with.
Right.
And that's how they make most of their decisions, is my guess.
Because I gotta tell you, I mean, I looked at that, and, I mean, it's not an imminent danger, but it's something that the longer you wait, the worse it's gonna become, and I don't wanna get in a position of something happening when we could have done something a few
I don't
days
think-
before that.
Absolutely. I don't think anyone is saying we're not doing the bridge. If you wanted to hold on to a little bit of cash for a couple months, this is where you would hold on to a little bit of
Alright.
cash.
Okay.
Bob?
Just for point of clarification, in terms of, I think it makes perfect sense that if it conflicts with the Haas construction, you know, this is the logical place is to be, perhaps push that project out. I just want to clarify that the element of the middle school construction, those construction vehicles do not cross the Washington Street Bridge. They are coming in.
Oh, coming from
So
Walpole?
they're not coming
The
through Washington
Walpole
Street.
side.
Okay.
So in essence, you know, that will not, that doesn't really have a big impact to the Brookside, certainly not gonna have a big impact to the ability of that bridge to be worked on at some point in the future, because the construction vehicles are coming from a different direction.
Okay. The next item is the Ellis Pond Dam. I'm sorry.
Hello?
Yes?
Alan, you're on the building committee for the school.
I am,
Have they discussed the pool and the school at the same time?
excuse me, what's the question again?
Have they discussed the pool and the school being construction going on at the same time? Are there concerns?
There shouldn't be, because again, as Bob is noted, you know, they have some very specific transportation routes. The heavy vehicles are coming from the Walpole side. And
Okay.
they're entering, well, either entrance is, you know, is before the Brookside, you know, whether it's the north entrance or the south entrance to the school. So that shouldn't really impact, the construction vehicles per se, shouldn't really impact anything related to construction at Haas. The thing that could be an issue somewhere down the road that we're always trying to work on is parking on site, you know, for individuals. We've also, as you know, a couple of pieces of property in front of the school have been purchased by the town. Those have been cleared. It's possible that those could be used for parking down the road, either for people associated with the school project or otherwise. But I mean, I understand the issues that people are talking about related to all 3 projects going at the time, particularly the pool and the bridge, and you know, I get it.
Okay,
All right, the
thank
next,
you.
If I may, not
Yes.
to belabor the point, but if I heard Tony right, I believe that if to go forward with the pool, you use fall and winter of '24 to construct it, with a plan for in the summer of '25 to have the new pool. I think basically by spring and summer of '25, that building at the middle school is gonna be substantially completed.
For the most part, it will be, I mean, the new building will be completed, they're gonna have to, take down the old building, which will be, some work, and then build, clear that, then build a new turf field where the old building was, but, I mean, look, the heavy concrete and steel and, rebars and, all that kind of good stuff is all gonna be done.
Yeah. So the next item is the Ellis Pond Dam for $165,000, also proposed from free cash.
This is when we do a biannual or every other year dam inspection and make whatever recommended improvements they suggest.
Is there a reason this can't come out of the
CPA. that's what
Or
she
the
asked.
storm water?
the CPA? Yeah,
Oh, the
I was saying,
CPA.
why couldn't this come out of CPA?
It's not a CPA project, it's not recreational, it's not, we use it in a recreational sense, but it's critical infrastructure.
But this is part of the conservation land.
Yeah, but it's not like an open space or a recreation program, it's a dam holding back water so it doesn't flood. It's not really recreation or conservation. Conservation Commission sort of manages it because it's water, but in reality, Public Works manages the dam.
Any other?
I'm willing to try, that's actually not a bad idea. Can CPA pay for it, but I don't think we get away with that.
Are there any other questions about that? So then the other, the last cash item is the road repair, and I had kind of moved that to the end because it's proposed that we would split the funding for this, that it would, as I understand it. And I did get a little confused because I thought I understood what we were doing, the Forbes money, and then we got to something that said we were gonna take $4 million out of it, and then we got a new thing that said, again, 2 million, so I just wanna make sure we're clear on what the plan would be here. Would be that this is the $2.8 million in our ongoing 5-year road repair program that we had agreed to 3 years ago?
Yeah, this is, I think, year 4.
This is year 4. And we have been borrowing for that, but
Correct.
because there's so much free cash and there's the opportunity to pay cash for it and not add to debt service, which I like a lot, not adding to debt service. And so the proposal would be to take $800,000 out of free cash and then use $2 million out of the Forbes. But the next step would be to then take $2 million out of free cash and put that in override stabilization.
Correct.
So sort of what we're trying to do is use $2.8 million of free cash to pay for the roads and then move Forbes money to override stabilization, but we're not allowed to do that directly.
Correct, so I can't move this from here to here, I can move it to here. I know, it's complicated, and I have a problem, DOR is still gonna have a problem with it, because again, we're
That's
just,
what I was gonna ask.
we've gotten the wink and the nod that sure, you can go ahead and do that, but they're very clear that towns don't sell properties at a surplus of $10 million. It just doesn't happen without another project that you're buying. You sell an old school and you're building a new school, it just doesn't happen. So
Right,
it's-
I mean, the town shouldn't be engaging in land speculation as our business, right? That's a bad
If you're
idea.
successful at it,
But
maybe
we
should
got
but you're-
really
you're-
lucky.
You're right, you complete luck.
God.
Hearing from you and Sarah at Capital Outlay about the concern over reducing the impact of debt service of the budget, applying the Forbes to this project versus the other 2 borrowing projects gets the most bang for your buck. Road projects can only be borrowed over 15 years, so that has a higher impact on the operating budget. As opposed to if we just took that $2 million and $800,000 of free cash and threw it at the pool, you'd have a higher increase in next year's debt service budget. So that's how it works, where it gets the most sort of bang for the buck by applying it to the bond that's gonna cost us the most.
Kelly?
I'm gonna let Sarah go first.
Okay.
I guess my only question is on this, thank you, is you can only borrow for roads for 15 years. Is the DOR gonna have trouble with that because of the length of time? I just vaguely remember in another conversation that it should be a 20-year project. That's why I'm asking this question.
No, so you're allowed to use proceeds from sale of property for anything that you would otherwise be borrowing for 5 years or more.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right, that answers.
Yeah, I asked about vehicles and I got the don't try it.
Okay, nope,
So,
that's
'cause
fair.
one of the ideas we
Okay.
had is we have about $1 million built into the budget for vehicles, and I said, hey, can we just take $1 million out of Forbes each of the next couple of years and do it? And they did not feel comfortable with vehicles.
No, that's why I asked. I thought it was 20,
And at
so
the
it's
end of the
only
day,
a 5.
we're, in our minds, that's kind of how we're applying it. We are applying it to the overall capital
I understand.
capital plan.
Yeah.
So if DOR really had a problem, it's okay, which $2 million of the $4.7 million of capital projects do you
Right.
really feel the most comfortable with?
Right.
This
Right.
is clean, clear,
All right,
easy
so,
to.
so as I understand
you.
it, it's, out of the 2.8 million, 2 million comes from Forbes, 800 grand comes from free cash.
Correct.
Good, okay.
So can I, what's the typical interest rate on road repair loans? Are they interest rate?
No, it's the same as any other bond.
Okay.
It's just because
Okay.
it's 15 years, the amount we're paying annually is a lot higher than if we could do it over 30 years.
That's totally fine. I just want, if it was interest free, there's really no
No cost.
there's no cost to borrowing.
That would be
so.
lovely.
Then my other question is since we have all this Forbes money that we can only use for stuff we would borrow for, can we pay for the pool with it?
So, in theory, you could. There's a couple of thoughts there. One is when we originally looked at Forbes, we said, okay, we want maybe $4 million to go into stabilization. And I think if you're offsetting borrowing with that $4 million, you're roughly getting to the same place. And that we were reserving $6 million for possible future open space purchases. That's kind of where we wanted to go with the money. Could we use more? Could you pay for the pool? You could, but the idea of borrowing for the pool is also people are going to use it for the next 30 years, so spread the life of a long-term project like that over the life of the users of the pool. That's why it'd be better to borrow for the pool, the traffic signals, because they're going to get used by everyone for the next 30 years. Not to say that open space wouldn't be, but the idea of paying more cash for the pool is people 10 years from now, that bond will have been paid off. I mean, maybe you do a $3 million bond for 30 years, so the impact is less. So you could, but then when the town has an opportunity to buy open space, which will probably come up in the next couple of years with the Kofsky Farm, that's been on the open space and recreation plan as a top priority for a long time. There's going to be a desire to do that. Once you say no to that, you can never go back to that again. It's not going to simply be sell it to us for open space or Norwood Bank will buy it for open space. It'll end up getting developed. So that's why holding on to that money. Now, if you wanted to go another $600,000 or $700,000 to do the road bond for this year, I suppose 5.2 million towards a $6 million purchase in the future is close enough that we can, fake the rest of it.
I'm trying to figure out how we can get at least $4 million in the overhead stabilization fund. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, I personally feel like I was my goal was to respect what town meeting voted for
Sure.
last year. And that was $2 million in the override stabilization, $2 million in the general purpose stabilization. Unfortunately, general purpose stabilization is not on the town meeting warrant. And so we can't add any money to general purpose stabilization right at this time.
But it can stay in free cash, and we could do that in the spring.
Right.
I just get nervous with money floating
I
around.
don't know that we can move that Forbes money in.
No, the free
No,
free
free
cash.
Free cash, free
Yes.
cash.
Free cash.
Correct.
Yes.
I mean, if you're looking to get to that number, I don't know if I can get to that number. If the parking lot is 500,000 and the bridge is 700,000,
Yeah, we're at
that's
1.2 right now.
1.2.
Yeah.
If you used another, forget that my bosses are in the room, if you used another 800,000 of Forbes, town meeting still has to say yes. You're still looking at more than $5 million for a purchase. It may not be the worst idea in the world if we make a large open space purchase to borrow a little bit of it, again, spreading a little bit of that cost over the next generation in $1 million, $1.5 million over 30 years is not going to croak us. That preserves $2 million in free cash. 1.2 you might need to actually still use, but it at least preserves it until May.
But I feel that town meeting was very clear that they wanted to leave at least $6 million sitting
Sure.
there.
Yeah.
This was,
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about this being a free cash windfall, but that sale of the Forbes property was absolutely a windfall.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
what town meeting wanted to do with it was leave that
Preserve it
$6
for
million
open space.
for,
Right,
preserve it for open
and,
space.
And that's fair. No, that's fair.
and-
That's
and-
completely fair.
And if we want to go through a little bit of ancient history,
No.
maybe Bob remembers this, is that, in Ann too, is that in the old days when they sold the Civic Center,
No.
and they wanted them to use
about-
that for a pool down the road, and there was pot of money available, and every year, it's like, well, let's take a few dollars out of this and do that, and then next year a few dollars and do this and whatever, so after a couple of years, there wasn't a few dollars left in there, because people use that money, and that's why I'm reluctant to take any additional money out of Forbes, because and as you might have noted, that's the understanding of town meeting, I
Just
think that's,
throwing it out there that's
well, it's good,
always an
Good,
option.
Yeah.
good as an option, but I think as a reality, I don't think it's a good idea.
So there's 8 million in Forbes, so technically there's 2 million over the 6 million commitment
Right.
that
so
was
there'd
made,
be-
right? So,
2.1.
Well, there was 10 million, and then if we take this 2 million out, there's 8 left.
And then the
Then-
6 million is the commitment for
then-
open space.
Right.
But
So
the
this
other
is 2
two
million.
was,
That
the other
could-
two was designated, I'm sorry.
For general stabilization.
Yes.
Right.
And that's okay. That's okay. It's still there that we can do one of these funny things again and figure out how to get it in there. Okay.
Well, and to that point, if you use an extra 800,000 of Forbes that you were gonna put into stabilization, that lets you throw another 800,000 of free cash into stabilization. I guess you're getting there. That might be cleaner to say there was a $2.8 million capital appropriation and we're moving $2.8 million, we're using $2.8 million of Forbes money for that and putting $2 million in override stabilization and $800,000 in regular stabilization, or just put it all into override stabilization, and you can argue it's 6 one way, half dozen the other way.
But we can't put any money in general purpose stabilization in November.
We probably could.
I mean, we could request it that be on the warrant, but it's not, so.
Yeah, it hadn't made its way through the selectmen's approval process and deciding what we're doing. We also have to tie it to capital spending. If you wanted to go to the full 2.8, I think we could probably do that. If we start going into the other capital projects, we can, but like a mechanic's truck, I don't think we can do a mechanic's
Right,
truck.
no.
So, not to say we can't do it next November.
Right.
If you wanted to go from 2 million to 2.8, I think that's easy to do. Going beyond that, I'd really have to look at the list, and depending on if we're gonna do these other 2 projects, some of the smaller ones, I just don't know if we could make it all happen this year. The 800,000 we can probably make happen consistent with what's on the warrant. If not, we would simply do that in May.
I mean, the 2.8 million to me makes sense because it ties out. It ties exactly out with what the road project is.
Sure.
You know what I mean? It ties right out of that.
But it's still not.
But before we make that determination, you know, one of the things we talked about is next year not doing any borrowing on the general fund, okay? If you take $800,000 off today, will that limit your flexibility next year to be able to do the capital project you think you have to do and still not use the, you know, the debt service?
No, I don't think so, because you're just taking another $800,000 out of Forbes. And maybe you have to make the argument at town meeting that we wanted to put 2 million into stabilization, but you're freeing up 800,000 in free cash that you can then put into stabilization or otherwise do what you want. It would basically preserve an additional $800,000 of free cash. Your goal is to put it in stabilization. We're gonna wait till May. Remember, free cash we can do whatever we want with. The Forbes is a lot more limited.
I would prefer that we don't put that, that's just me, don't put that, don't use that additional 800,000 this year.
I tend to agree only because I think that that's closest to what town meeting
Yes.
wanted last year.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's, has been my goal on
Yeah,
that, was to
okay.
get as close as we could.
Okay?
So,
Excuse me.
Sure.
Please explain this for me. Try it again.
so the
do we
question,
do?
but the question we were just talking about was, you know, we have a total of a request for $2.8 million in road repair
Right.
money. The original proposal was to take $2 million from Forbes and $800,000 from free cash to get to the
Gotcha.
2.8 million. But Kelly was saying perhaps we should do $2.8 million from Forbes. And Alan was saying he was more comfortable sticking with the 2 million from Forbes and 800,000 from free cash. And then
I'm with
to be
you,
okay, all right, all right. So,
We can move on.
Okay.
I'm the only one we can move on.
but these are all really good
Yeah.
questions, and I am
We can
thrilled
move on.
with this conversation.
Yeah.
Like
No,
this
we
is
can
what I've
totally-
been
yeah,
looking
we
for.
can
Right.
totally move on.
Yeah.
Totally cool.
All right, so
Willable.
let's.
Thank you, Kelly.
So these are the cash projects. Let's stop here and take some votes, and then we can talk about the borrowing projects separately. So what is the will of the committee? It has been suggested that perhaps the Savage parking lot and the Washington Street Bridge could be delayed without necessarily, the vote could be delayed, which wouldn't actually necessarily even delay the project.
I would like.
Wouldn't lead to significant cost, wouldn't likely lead, I want to qualify.
Right,
it
fair
as
enough,
a-
fair enough.
Huge significant
Fair
cost
enough.
increases.
I think we should remove them and we can assess then, and if we're in a different place with the Forbes money, we could potentially take the borrowing out of the
Right.
Forbes money at that point in the spring, if we could, to then get the money into the stabilization fund, like what we wanted to do with Forbes and what town meeting voted on, right? So I would prefer to take these out, I'm happy to make that motion, and approve the remainder of the projects.
Second,
Sarah, did you have?
Nope, that's fine. I was
Okay.
gonna second
And
it.
did you have any discussion, any discussion on that motion?
No, I'm in agreement.
Okay, so let's put it to a vote. Anne,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Kelly,
Let me think of, no, just kidding, yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
And chair votes yes, so that is unanimous. So I'm gonna zero out these two items.
And yeah, if you did want to pay for those projects out of Forbes in May, I'd feel more comfortable be able to do that. Just looking at the list of the airport projects are probably a no. The apparatus floor, the truck, the fight,
Yeah.
we're not
Yeah.
gonna be able to.
No,
Yeah,
that's
and
totally fair.
then at that point, we might be able to then put some money in general purpose stabilization, because that would, yeah, so I think that that all makes sense, okay.
Or maybe we don't need all that money for a budget overrun, and all of a sudden, we've got our $2 million to put.
Right.
And then another $2 million to put someplace else, you know?
Exactly, maybe the state continues
I
to
concur.
increase their chapter 70 money
Yeah.
at, you know,
You know?
generous rates, and we're looking good. All right, so let's then take a vote, can I have a motion to approve the remaining cash projects, which are the airport runway, the airport fence, the design for the public safety apparatus floor, the mechanics truck, the police red dot fire alarms, the police tasers, the Ellis Pond Dam, and then $800,000 from free cash for road repair and $2 million from Forbes for road repair.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Anne,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, that's unanimous as well. All right, excellent. Thank you. I know this has been a long discussion, but I do think that this is a lot of money, and it's really important for us to discuss it carefully. All right, so the next two items before us are the Hawes Pool, which would be $5.7 million in borrowing. We're proposing 30-year borrowing, and I think the assumption was 4.75% interest rate, which brings us to a debt service amount of about $361,000.
Yearly?
Yearly
Okay.
for 30 years. And then the other item would be the traffic lights along the Washington Street corridor, which would be a $5 million project. That would also be a 30-year borrowing, same debt service, same interest rate. So the debt service on that would be $317,500. As we discussed before, approving those two projects together would increase the debt service, like from FY24 to FY25 by $341,000
Single year.
for that 1 year, right? Then, and actually, but then the following year, there is $308,000 coming off of the debt service.
Okay.
So by the following, if we did not borrow at all next fall, then by FY26, we would be back to a debt service level that's comparable to FY24
And the proposal was to use free cash to
Offset that first year.
offset the.
for that 1 year. And we would be voting that free, we are proposing that to borrow that, to use that free cash to offset for a year, but we're not voting on that now. That
Correct,
would
that
be a
would be
vote
in-
that we would take in May, but we have included that in our like projections of what might have to happen in May.
So can someone just, I know we're taking 30-year loans, who can tell me what the expected life cycle of both of these things is?
Well, if you want to base it on past life cycle, the pool's been around 75 years. The
It's
traffic
like a bomb
signal,
shelter.
the traffic signal was installed in the early 80s.
Okay.
So they're
35 years, 40
They're
years.
30-year projects at least. I mean, the pool should go more than that. The traffic signal, if you're replacing the equipment and repairing it regularly, it's not just about the arms and the mast and the equipment. There's a lot of underground work that's
Yeah,
really
yeah.
what the bulk of the cost of the project is. And it came up at the town meeting information session last night, and we had to make some clarification. Somebody thought it was just Washington and Manhattan Street right here at the intersection. It's the whole system. It's 11 separate lighted systems, light poles. So it's not just the 4 or 5 you see right here.
And I have one other question on that. So
Obviously, there's engineering improvements made at any time for all of these things. There's software, obviously, and stuff that goes into this too. How are those upgrades handled? So do we buy today and we're stuck with that technology for 30 years? Or are there upgrades that we get to that software that controls like the timing of the signals and all that
So
kind of
it's
stuff?
more modern technology that's easier to replace. Right now, it's what I call a dummy system. My being an electrical engineer could probably explain it better, but it's just a physical hardwired system where somebody manually goes in and adjusts the timing so that this
Basically,
light
just says
goes.
every 5 seconds, this goes.
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
We'll be going to a sensor system that has the ability to adjust it based on both vehicle sensors and timing that we set for the system. So it'll know that like on Sunday, you're gonna want more time for pedestrians to pass because it's not a big deal. We'll also be able to, if we had, the Boston Pops again, which maybe that'll come back again, you can more easily adjust the system and make changes to it electronically as opposed to now where you literally need to send a technician out to.
Does it have any like
General
AI
wires.
or predictive technology?
No, it'll be able to actually sense that the somebody's pushing buttons. There'll be some ADA improvements. It's not going to be like
It's not gonna be
super
like
high-tech,
it's not like
but-
I can measure the traffic patterns for say these 3 months and then I know what my traffic pattern needs to be. It still needs to be programmed by someone.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
fair enough.
I guess the question, Tony, is, we know it's an old system, it's not perfect, a newer system would be better, but, why do we really have to do something like this? What's the hue and cry to do something, in that area? Because, it's a lot of money.
Sure. So there's a couple of things. It's a significant amount of money. The traffic flow through most of town runs through the Washington-Manhattan Street corridor. I think the last traffic count I looked at in Manhattan Street's about 20,000 cars a day. So when you think of the sheer volume of traffic that's going through that system, it ties up everything throughout the entire town. When we say that the system is failing, it's all hardwired. Wires are starting to literally run out, and we're patching it, we're using temporary equipment. We can't get repairs for the equipment. It's 40-year-old equipment, so we can't even get some of the parts that we need, so we find a temporary patch. That's starting to cost us significant money. More importantly, the system is starting to fail, and it's starting to fail more regularly. And when it fails, that disrupts traffic for, again, the entire time, for several hours. It's not like, hey, there's a problem, let's go in and just fix it. It's calling in, maybe one of the electrical engineers from the light department can come down and sort of rejigger the wires. And because the infrastructure that's underground is also what part of the significant problem is, we can keep slapping up new little walking people signals and stuff like that. It's the whole system has reached well beyond the end of its life cycle. Chief, you want to just talk to the impact from your perspective on traffic and safety?
Yeah, I just want to say, that, first of all, sometimes collisions occur because people get frantic, get frustrated, they swing out, and they act, in ways that they shouldn't. Sometimes that comes from breakdowns. The other thing that I see anyway is just a change in the uptown as far as pedestrian traffic. It wasn't too long ago people talked about all the empty storefronts in Norwood Center. You don't see that anymore, right? They're all full. There are shops everywhere, both sides of the street. A lot more pedestrian traffic. A lot more people waiting on the corners, waiting to cross. And when the system fails, first of all, you want to make sure it's safe for pedestrians, and second of all, you don't want people to become frustrated because their end of the system is broken down, and they swing out and they pass a car when they shouldn't, or they pass a car on the right when they shouldn't, because the system is failing. So, unfortunately, we've had some pedestrian strikes, quite frankly, along Washington Street over the years. And a well-running, humming system, can avoid some of those risks. So that's, particularly the Washington Street side that I think is where you see some risk of particular pedestrians. So I'm very interested in seeing.
So Chief, from your perspective, you think this is an important project?
I do, yeah. I really do. It's old as it is. It's failing in the way that Mr. Mizuko described. And just the uptown being so pedestrian dense at this point, and heavy flows of traffic, you want to be able to move. You want to be able to move the Washington Street traffic along, preferably as a line, and move it all along. If somebody comes down a feeder street and trips it, then so be it. It stops. But otherwise, you really want that traffic to flow and to be able to empty out that area as smoothly as you can. So I think it's important, yes.
I think that the conversation about the lifetime is interesting. The fact that we've used the last system for 40 years does not give me confidence that we will get 40 years of life out of this new system. I have an old refrigerator in my basement that's been working for 30 years, but if you buy a new one, you're lucky if you get 10 years out of it, right? And this is not unusual, and I think, you know, I did have a conversation with Mark Ryan earlier today, and he was talking about how the current system is all based on copper wires. This new system would be fiber, which is great, but, you know, it's not, I think, designed to be easily upgraded. So it is possible that we would be facing some upgrades before you get to 30 years. You know, hopefully if we put in new steel things that are actually hold arms and things like that, those will last 30 years. But I don't know that the electronics will.
Well, and it's not that the whole system will last 30 years without maintenance. There'll
Right.
have to be, you know, regular maintenance and repairs throughout that process. But we shouldn't have to do the infrastructure again for that period of time. And just one other point to mention, I focus too much on the traffic, and the chief's right. The pedestrian portion of the system, I would say, is equally important. And it does come with modernizing the ADA enhancements for the whole downtown, because again, it's based on what was relevant 40 years ago.
Right. One thing that Mark Ryan did say is that, like, you know, Alan's question about, like, where's the urgency here? And I was wondering the same thing. I mean, last year, this project was on the capital outlay plan, and then it was pulled off. And so I was like, all right, well, is it really urgent? Because we were told last year it was, but now, and then it went away. And it seems like I haven't seen evidence of failures. But Mark did say that one of the intersections, I believe it was on Railroad, has failed. They were not able to get equipment because the system is 40 years old. It's gone end of life. Nobody's supporting it any longer. And so they brought in something that's temporary and it's just timed, but it's not synced with the rest of the system, and that is causing some problems. So I do understand that this is certainly an important thing. It's also a lot of money, and it will add to our debt service to more than $300,000 a year for the next 30 years. And, you know, going back to my previous conversation about, I would have loved that budget balancing had gotten further into the process, and we could say, like, we feel confident that we can absorb another $300,000 in the budget. And we, you know, I worry that if we vote for something now, then come March, when we're putting the budget together and we're saying, like, we don't have enough money, are we going to be wishing that we hadn't boxed ourselves into a corner? So in an ideal world, we would have more information before we made a decision on that.
I think Maya have also raised a very good point. I mean, technology and stuff is changing so quickly. I would expect a lot of these traffic systems, just like everything else, to start using things like AI to actually be able to manage the trends and patterns of traffic. A 30-year loan for something we expect to get maybe 30 years out of seems like a lot. Would we get a lower interest rate at a 20-year loan? Yes, it would increase our annual borrowing.
Correct.
But at the same time, the best thing is about when you buy a car, you take a loan out for 5 years, is you get like 2 or 3 years where you don't have to have a car payment, right? And that's like the best part of the whole thing, right? This is like, we're borrowing this money, oh crap, now we have to borrow another now $10 million to put in our infrared and AI technology to do our traffic lights. So that's my concern, and I do agree with Maya's concern about the financials of it as well.
I mean, it's a system that's going to get replaced at some point.
Yes.
For sure.
And this is also an example of a project that every 6 months you wait, you could see significant cost increases coming along with it. And then what's the cost going to be to replace it in 3 years? We have a cost of maintenance over time, more failure over time, more safety issues, less ADA accessibility, and we're still looking at this cost. It's not going to be $2 million down the road where there's a solution out there that we don't have to replace the system.
And that's fair, but I mean, look at like the conversations we had about the Coakley. How much money did we put in the heating and cooling system in the Coakley to fix it, instead of saying this just isn't gonna work, we need to look at a different solution. So there are ways that you can buy that for a year or two. I'm not suggesting we do it for as many years as we did it with that. But I think Maya's point is fair, that it is an additional amount of money that's going into borrowing, and it's significant.
I think the Coakley's initial cost projections were $80 million too, so we've seen the cost of delay there with our.
Yeah. Bob, did you have,
I just wanted to also just add that obviously the Board of Selectmen do support this. And we certainly will bring back the information you have on the other two projects, which are reasonable to me in terms of the delay. This particular one, we do support. I think we should also mention that we did receive, I don't have it with me, did receive a letter from the Disability Commission in support of it. I think we are, when we talk about a $5 million project, my concern would be, and speaking for myself, hopefully the board would agree with me, is that this is the kind of project that when you kick it down the road, you're not gonna look at $5 million anymore. It's gonna escalate in cost. And to go from where you started with the initial putting this, and this has been on the plan for a couple of years. This is another one of those projects where it was hovering around the $4.5 million level, and then finally when we have design, it's up to $5 million. So I believe that, the only other thing I would add is we have, and I know we all agree with this, we've kicked a lot of projects down the road for a long time, and we're seeing the price of it now, whether it be the pools or the traffic signal. But I think that this is one that if we are that concerned about our debt service addition, then I don't believe you'd be revising this project 1 or 2 years down the line, because that will always be a potential rationale for not doing it. So I'm just stating that we advocate for it now. I think that we all have the forecast. We're looking at it now. I agree, Maya. We need to do more scrubbing of it. It doesn't appear that debt service is a primary driver of the deficits we might be seeing. So I would just advocate that you make a decision that you'd like to, as you will. But I think this is one that I sense the board has a real sense that we should get done.
I want to be clear, I am not proposing at all that we wait a year or two on this. And I disagree with the idea that we wouldn't do it 2 years from now because we couldn't afford the debt service then. What I'm saying is that we would just, once we get through this year's budget process, which would happen by March, we would have much more confidence to know what our projections, we look like. We would have had a conversation about what mechanism are we using to control growth of the budgets going forward? How do we think that this is all going to fit together? We'd have an idea of what the state is doing. And so I think, we would also have more confidence in whether or not we actually would be able to pay all cash for capital outlay next year, because we would then be at least halfway through, maybe 3/4 of the way through the fiscal year, and have a better sense of how our revenues are looking. And so those are the pieces of information that I would be looking for, not confidence that we know everything that's going to happen in the next 30 years, but we know what's better confidence of what's going to happen in a year or two.
Sure. I agree with that. I think that we know we have to do this project, and this is the type of project that the longer we delay, the interest cost increase and the cost of the project is just going to go up. So we might feel better doing it in May. Is that 6 to 9 months worth $100,000, $200,000, $400,000? I don't think it is. The sooner this project happens, the less it's going to cost us. It's going to happen at some point soon, and delaying is just going to add to costs significantly.
But the inverse could happen because interest rates in the primary markets are starting to stabilize, right? And so they could actually come down. It could actually cost less. So that is a significant possibility where we are right now.
Not usually for the way municipal bonds work. We always trail the general market by a couple of points.
Fair.
And we're always a few years in catching up to it.
Fair.
We always react a few years a little bit slower.
Fair.
It's the same thing with recessions. We're usually 2 years after the recession hits, it hits municipal finance. So even if borrowing rates level off where they are, 7.5%, even if they drop down to 6, we're still in that 4.5 range. We're not going back to our glorious bonds from 5 or 6 years ago at 2% that we're getting on some of them that were
And that's fair. That's
ridiculous.
That's totally fair.
Sarah?
No.
Is the design on this project done? So we know that $5 million is,
You don't know what costs until you go out to bid and then build the whole project, but that is the latest estimate that we have.
when was that estimate?
2 years ago.
That's
No, it's
a
been
2-year-old
The
number?
design was done 2 years ago, so yeah, it was funded.
Yeah, so I think the engineer's estimates are not 2 years old.
So how old are the engineers' estimates?
Mark got an updated number, was it earlier in the year, where we went from 4.7 to 5, so just this summer.
Okay. Alan?
Well, I mean, you know, before I decide whether I wanna fund this or not, and again, maybe I'm being redundant, but I wanna make it perfectly clear that the understanding is that next fiscal year, you're not coming in for any debt service on the general fund.
I was gonna go for the
We're-
indoor pool next year, Alan, that you seem so interested in.
Well,
That's-
At Tony's residence.
So I guess we're also
That's-
putting off the $2 million rehab of your office next year also.
No, we're just gonna do that as a reserve fund transfer.
It's coming out of Forbes.
Yeah, it's coming out of Forbes. That's the plan, that's the goal, and we're in a unique situation where we can say, looking at what we have next year, we reasonably believe we're gonna have the revenues. Nobody can predict what's going to happen. Do I feel confident? I feel confident that we're gonna be able to pay cash next year. We are in a good financial place right now. The town is actually in its best financial condition. So that's important to keep in context where I feel confident that we will not be looking to borrow next year.
Sarah?
I guess my only concern is, I'm not arguing that we're in a good financial place. It's the long-term projections. I don't feel, and this is me speaking as a finance commission member, I don't feel like I have, that there's enough information out there to feel confident about the long term, not the long term, the next 2 to 3 years, quite honestly. So I guess that's
Sure.
where I'm struggling, and honestly, as a capital outlay member, putting on that hat, we haven't really vetted fiscal year 25, is that what?
Right.
So I guess that's also my concern. You're confident, and I understand, that's where you spend all of your time, and that's your job, I fully understand that, but the capital outlay committee hasn't vetted that piece of the plan yet to feel comfortable on that.
And if this was $5 million this year and $5 million in May and $5 million next year, I'd say, sure, we can hold off. I guarantee you the longer we wait, it will cost us more. So if we're worried about what the budget's gonna look like in 2 or 3 years, the longer we wait on this, it's only gonna look worse. That, whatever the annual debt number came in at $360,000, that will only go up from here.
Yep.
Every day that it gets delayed, I can guarantee you this project has to be done, it will be done, and it's only gonna cost more the longer we wait. If it was a nice project, if it was, we wanna put 10 lights in downtown or something, we can look at that, this is only gonna cost us more. So I understand the concern, delaying will make that concern worse. And if it's bad, we're still paying it. If it's good, we're still paying it, because we have to do the project.
I do think that in general that prices are going, go up, but I also think that we've seen some examples of some real significant inflation recently, but that was also, like, as a nation, we've seen significant inflation. We've seen unusual supply chain things. So I don't think that, the 10% a year numbers are necessarily something that we can assume. Things are leveling out in many ways.
But even generally, when we've done construction projects, including the middle school, they assume roughly a 5% annual construction cost, and then add in the potential for higher debt service cost. And remember that for certain public works projects, the timing is important. If we're going out to bid in the summer, most contractors have already lined up their work, and we're kind of getting the end of the spectrum. We've been lucky with the water borrowing and the road borrowing that we're going out to bid really in the winter and getting contractors first. An approval in May for this, potential couple $100,000 more, getting at the very end of contractor schedules, which you don't get as good of a bid on, and the project is gonna take a significant amount of time. They may look at it and say, well, we can bid, but we're not gonna start till the following spring. Now you're looking at the following spring for doing it, and then I'd be concerned about change orders and you're just delaying it even further.
Anne?
All right, and I hope you don't hear a dog in the background soon, but, okay, I have a couple of questions. Is there any way with this that we could get some money, some grant money or anything? Do they do this for this type of project? I mean, this type of project to me also falls under the ADA things, and is there money available to help us through with this, and has somebody looked for it?
Yeah, we're always looking at different public works grants and different ADA grants. There's nothing for things like traffic signalization. We've been successful the last couple of years in some complete streets money that sometimes lets you put in new ADA little pads and stuff like that. but nothing for this. The system, and again, the underground infrastructure work is where a lot of the cost is as well. The state generally likes to fund problem areas or nice to haves and not take care of sort of your core traffic responsibilities.
Okay. This is, all right. From what I am hearing, and I think that, I think I'm hearing from a couple of people that there's a little concern that maybe the length of time over this borrowing isn't going to be the same as the length of time that we actually have good structure and good, things to run the structure that we are buying. So is there, what would happen if we shortened the length of our borrowing?
It's just going to increase your annual debt service, which again, we can do 15 years. It's not a problem to do it over 15 years. The problem is your annual debt service number is going to go up from that $315,000. Where do you want to, what's your priority?
Has somebody done the math? What would happen if it went down to 15 years?
Can you do 20?
If you give me a minute, I can give you a back of the envelope on 20 years.
I thought you did that somewhere. I'm trying to think
I thought I
of
did
where
in my
you did
response
it.
to Ann's
Yes,
questions.
you did, you did.
but
My
You
guess,
did.
my guess off the top
I'll
of my
find
head,
it.
it's gonna be about 440.
you just give me-
Am I just
you
doing
say?
the- It's 440.
I can't hear.
That's just a quick swag off the top of my head. You get typically a half a percentage point less in interest rate.
Nope, that's not right. Hold on a second. Everyone,
I didn't-
hang out for a minute.
I'm going into my Gmail right now. So.
While he's doing that, I'd like to make a comment on this.
Yes.
For the project itself, I do see a need. I walk all over town all the time, and most times I walk through the center of town. And I don't want to tell you how many people I've saved at Washington and Manhattan Street.
I'll have a 20-year number.
I'm
It's
sorry, could you repeat that?
it's really tough
Yeah.
as a pedestrian walking downtown.
So ballpark at 4.5% for $5 million over 20 years, $380,000 a year. Again, these are rough numbers. It could go up 10 or 20 grand. So you'd be looking at, call it $60,000 more annually. Now, the $341,000 we would put up to cover the first year debt service, we could certainly do that. FY26 would then, instead of being roughly flat, might be up $40,000 or $50,000, which is not a whole lot in the grand scheme of.
What your total debt service is.
Correct, total
Yeah.
debt service. So we can do that, but again, the
It's
number's
putting
higher.
more pressure
it's a
on
little
debt
more free cash,
service,
so
right.
we can go wherever everyone wants, depending on what your concern is. Again,
Yeah.
it's a project we're going to have to do, and the longer we wait, it's going to cost us. 15 years is
So-
not
so
unreasonable.
So how do my fellow commissioners feel if we did something like that? Would you feel better about this project?
In some ways, yes. Myself, I do feel like 15 years seems more appropriate for this type of borrowing. But of course, then that doesn't resolve our issue that we said we'd really like to have a better sense of the operating budget for FY25 and FY26 before we start to commit to this.
To Ann's
Okay.
point, you're right. Do you feel better when I can see you feeling worse about it? It's costing more annually.
Right.
And we don't want to always do this, but just because we want to get through some timing and we don't want to delay projects and cost us more, if you did 15 years, we would need an extra $50,000 the first year. It would be an extra $50,000 the second year. You don't want to get in the habit of saying, let's appropriate free cash to pay for our increase in debt service, but you could do that in FY26 to keep it flat, and it's not, we can find 50 grand in free cash in FY26. That wouldn't necessarily croak us, but FY27, we may be borrowing more. At some point, we're going to absorb that $50,000.
I think 20 years is not unreasonable,
I agree.
when everything is said and done. I mean, we could,
Isn't that what the engineer said in the
Well-
letter? I was trying to remember.
so it was something like that.
So
I mean,
remember
it's-
that, the life, you can borrow over 30 years because that's the life expectancy of a total replacement of the system. It's gonna have maintenance over time. There might be maintenance in 10 or 15 years, just like a building. We're gonna
Yeah,
build a middle
sure.
school, And, you know, yeah, that bond is, I think we did, do we do 20 years or 30 years for the middle school?
30.
We did 30 years. We're gonna spend millions of
I think it was
dollars
25.
during its life cycle. I think it was 25, you're right. But we're gonna spend millions of dollars in repair and upgrades. We're still gonna spend money on the system. The likelihood that we would do a total replacement in less than 30 years is insignificant, I'd say. And at year 22, so we're looking, this would be in 2045, what is $300,000 gonna be to us in that point in time? And if there's 6 or 7 years left, we might say, we'll just pay the $2 million, because people will probably be making $2 million a year in 25 years. We can try to, in the past, when we refinanced, and we've saved a ton of money by refinancing, we've locked our bonds in a way that we can't pay them off without paying the interest amount. We can always look at trying to make sure the bond stays open, and we could throw more at it. I mean, there's different options there, but we also don't want to overcomplicate it where we go to bond counsel and say, guys, here's what we're doing. Instead of 30, it's 20, but we're going to use 100 grand in free cash, and we're going to delay this payment. That all gets a little complicated.
Yeah.
But
So if we
there's-
went to 15, it's 38249 a month, which is about $420,000 a year. So you're talking about $110,000 increase. So I wasn't far off.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the way I feel about this is that coming in today, I was prepared to vote against it. However, I have gotten the assurance, and, you know, we've all heard the assurance that we're not gonna be coming in for any
You're not
additional
recording, right?
debt service. No, believe me, it sits up all up here. We're not coming in with any additional debt service next year, as well as listening to Chief Brooks. You know, I think, again, in spite of how I felt coming in, I think I'd be inclined to vote for this now.
Yeah, and I think I would just add, Tony, you know, from the selectman's standpoint, I think one of the reasons we supported this is because the initial investment that we made at town meeting to appropriate $550,000 for the design. I think the argument then was that this was a high priority need, and so, and I appreciate how we're trying to figure out how to pay for it. That's the conversation here. But in terms of the expectation of town meeting, I think the people that voted for this figured that the next logical step was to move forward with the project. If we're kind of moving it or delaying it a little bit, you know, I would say that they might have some questions about, you sold me a bill of goods on how urgent it was. Not that it's exactly that, but, you know, I think in terms of prioritizing projects, you know, this one, at least for us, was really high.
Although this was on the
Medium.
capital outlay plan for last year.
Right.
And was removed, and then was listed in the capital outlay plan for this year as a medium priority.
Right.
So it's, yeah.
Do
It's
we
mixed
have-
messaging.
Yes.
Do we want to have a motion? Do we have?
I'm open to a motion.
I would make a motion to approve for 20 years borrowing.
Is there a second for that?
Yeah, I'll second it.
All right,
And
seconded by Ann.
in speaking to the motion, I mean,
Yes.
you know, I said 20 years, I mean, I don't know whether it necessarily has to be 20 years. However, you know, I think if we're gonna do this, let's do it and just move on. Particularly since I've got the commitment that we're not gonna go ahead with any additional capital in the general fund next year.
Borrowing.
Borrowing,
Right.
thank you.
Can I just suggest that perhaps it would be wise for the FinCom to just write to the chair of the Board of Selectmen to just put forward that policy guideline, if you will?
Mhm.
I think a lot of times.
It gets lost in the
coordination-
translation.
Yeah, and if you get a letter, it gets on our agenda, and that way we can have a pretty good open discussion. I think it's good for you too, because that way we
Yeah.
can chime in formally.
Okay.
So just a suggestion.
We have sent a couple of letters to the Board of Selectmen, and so we are looking for that dialogue.
Right.
And we would appreciate your attention to those things that we send you.
Good, okay.
I think my concern with that conversation specifically is that my voting on this today is under the assumption that there is going to be no ask for borrowing next year, right? But now from what Selectman Donnelly said, they haven't even discussed that yet.
Well, that was the proposal that Mr. Mizuko put forward to capital outlay, and I believe that memo was also shared with the Board of Selectmen at the same time that it was shared with capital outlay and with FinCom, with the very clear understanding that
This is the proposal.
this is the
going forward.
proposal, yes.
I think
I
Bob's just
just
saying.
think, I just think it makes it for a stronger
It's to-
statement.
it's to
if-
formalize
if
it.
you formalize it and ask, would you please put this on your agenda for discussion? Just
Okay.
going forward. Because, you know, when you ask for it to be on the agenda, boom, then it's gonna get attention, we're gonna read it, we're gonna see it. I read everything we get, but I just think from a process standpoint, that just has a little more oomph to it, if you will. Ask for it to be put on our agenda, and I think that,
Would that be for Tony to do in the first memo we said with the proposal? I mean, if everyone got Tony's
I'm
proposal
just
saying that
thinking
this
going-
is the,
This is just a suggestion going forward.
Okay.
I think we all understand the
See-
position, you know.
So you want us to ask for it to be put on the agenda as opposed to
That's
just.
my suggestion, I don't know
So
what
it's
you think, I
opposed to
mean.
just a letter,
Yeah,
because we.
I mean, I'm not suggesting that everything you discuss gets sent to us to go on the agenda, but I think something that has this kind of implication, I just think it gets on the agenda, and that ensures that the board has a discussion about it. And, you know, so,
Okay, and when's your next meeting?
the 14th,
You're not meeting before town meeting?
no. We may meet maybe before the evening of town meeting.
Okay.
I don't think that's a
I don't
precursor
think-
or anything. Bob's just saying in the future.
Yeah.
No, I understand, but I
think
had understood that you were meeting next week.
Yeah, but for the purposes of what you've discussed, I think we understand that, but I just, in the interest of just making sure that we can make sure we have the mechanisms to ensure we're collaborating and talking to one another, that's my suggestion.
All right, because I guess it's the understanding of capital outlay, I guess it's the understanding of FinCom. We'll just formalize it and hopefully it'll be the understanding of the selectmen also.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I might get 4 emails tonight saying, Bob, that's a stupid idea, don't do it, but, you know, I think at this point, it's a good request, and I don't see any harm.
We have a motion on the floor. So, it's a discussion on that, Sarah?
I don't know if this is, I'm just, if this was voted on at the special, is it going out to bid in the next 30 days? Is it prepared to go? What's the timeline on it? I guess that would be my question.
Would go out to bid over the winter, and we'd look to start in the spring.
Okay.
so by delay, we delay a season.
Correct. That's the real concern with a particular public works project. If we're waiting till May, we can still go, town meeting can be May 10th, we can go out to bid May 11th, but it's 30 or 45 days to get them back. You gotta do due diligence project time. They need mobilization time. They're starting October next year. Can they do it October, November, December? Maybe, but we're at the tail end of their work season.
Well, Sarah said the meeting's in March.
Right, there is a meeting in March.
There is, most of your infrastructure vendors, people doing roads and stuff like that, have started to really already commit themselves to jobs even by March, because the minute the snow is done and they're able to go out there, they're getting cranking.
So the motion before us is to assume a 20-year loan, and what did we come up with as our number for our guess of what the debt service would be on that?
Ballpark, $380,000.
I think it's gonna be slightly higher than that.
For 20 years versus 15?
Yeah, let me just do it real quick.
And then we would need a corresponding 3, yeah.
Would it be natural that the 4.75 would be the same? I guess that's the.
5 million, right?
Yeah.
And then we'd need roughly $400,000 in free cash to pay off the debt service, the extra increase in debt service, because it was already a little bit over,
Correct.
yeah.
I came up with 387 if you do 4.75.
Okay, we'll go with 387.
Yep, Tony's.
Okay,
387, 734, 18
It
if you
could
want to
be
get
a
technical.
10%.
all right, we'll go with 388 then.
Oh boy.
We'll round to the
I actually
nearest
got a
1,000,
little
right?
slightly less, but we'll go with his number.
Gracious.
It's in the ballpark.
So, the implication on that would be, now that we've
Now we put more pressure on
That does put more debt pressure on the operating budget. But as Tony said, there is the option to use some of that free cash to even offset that extra debt service in FY,
You could
the
technically-
following year, not just this coming year, but the year after.
You could technically take it from Forbes too.
We can look at if there's any bonds we can pay off, but we did a big refi 4 or 5 years ago. That's also a way to possibly reduce. You may not save anything by doing it, but if we have the money, if we can find some smaller bonds to pay off, we can look at that. Please don't expect that to be ready by town meeting, but
No.
that's something we can look at
Gotcha.
for
Okay.
next fiscal year.
All right. Any further discussion on this?
So 20 years, we said?
So we are now, the proposal before us is to approve the, and Alan, this was your motion, so let me make sure I get this right. Approve the traffic signal project at $5 million, assuming borrowing over 20 years.
Correct.
Okay. Any further discussion? I'll put it to a vote. Anne?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Sarah?
No.
I'm gonna vote yes. But I am reluctant. You know, like I'm ambivalent on this one, but I do understand. So that passes 4-1. The next item is the Hawes Pool Project, $5.7 million. That would be 30 years of borrowing for about $361,000 a year. And this one I know is very time sensitive because there's a very small window to get this in.
For this year?
For this year, and you have to work around construction season.
No, I'm
and
asking if we
pool.
expect it to be done by the opening season.
I don't know if we'll.
So
Well,
we'll,
it was on the. I mean,
I think the plan would be,
Eve.
this would be summer of '25.
So it'd skip a season, it would be closed, and would open the next
While
year.
we're bidding, and then after the season closes,
Got
then
it.
you can go into construction.
Yeah, which, from the perspective
why do we
of
have to approve it now?
doing work at the middle school, it's not the worst thing in the world not to have kids there, with the issues, with the construction project right next door.
Right.
So if we're not gonna go out for bid until the spring or summer, why do we have to approve this now?
So we'll be going out to bid in the spring and lining up the work. We need an appropriation to be able to go out to bid. Not that we're doing it just for grant funding. We are in line for about $500,000 in grant funding. We need a full appropriation to be able to get that as well.
Do we have a sense of when we might hear about that grant?
I would say it's probably 80% certain that we're getting it, but the state doesn't like to officially tell you that you're getting it until any certain point in time.
Anne, are we losing you? All right.
Yeah, Tony, do you have
Thank
any?
you, Ann.
Do you have any estimate of the amount of water and the cost of water that we're losing from the pool?
Sure, so the cost is more minimal than the total amount. The amount is somewhere around 500,000 gallons a year, which sounds dramatic. It's probably $7,000-8,000 worth of water. It's more that it's
Still
$500,000.
$500,000
Oh, sorry,
gallons worth of water.
$500,000. Let me correct. 500,000 gallons of
Yeah.
chlorinated water
Going
leaking
into
into the
this.
water table.
Right.
And nobody likes when I make my joke that it keeps the stream nice and clean. But there's probably why there's no fish in
Been
there.
a lot of years
Just-
now.
just- May I on that point, is interesting because the design did have to go before the conservation board for replacement of the pool house and where it needs to be located. And I think it may have been the first time that the Conservation Commission was aware that that amount of chlorinated water was getting into the Hawes watershed, so they were very pleased that the design takes certainly the pool equipment and pushes it further away from the street, and that the new design, the new pool will stop the leakage into the Hawes of chlorinated water.
If we approve this tonight, the $5.7 million, if there is grant money, then that would just reduce the amount that we borrow, right?
Correct. It's a grant reimbursable, and I know I always give my lecture on borrowing. We never borrow the full amount of money all at once. We borrow sort of as needed. Once we have an authorization, we can go out and get it in chunks as needed. It's a grant reimbursable, so we need the full amount. we would try to use that first. Not that we ever use that money first, but if the project total cost comes in at 5.7 million, we would only be up for 5.2. If the project goes over, we've at least got now a buffer above and beyond the contingency if the cost goes over.
And it's also critical that the motion be worded accordingly, that we be given the ability to accept any and all grants.
So there's
from
a,
outside sources.
Yeah, sorry, there's a separate article on the warrant that is a housekeeping article for this specific grant that DEP requires to allow us to do it.
Yeah, but I mean, the article specifically for Hawes would have to.
Yeah, bond council's taking care of
Yeah,
that.
good, okay, I'll take a look at that.
All right, is there anyone who'd like to make a motion on this?
Motion to approve the borrowing for the hospital.
All right, motion by Sarah.
Second.
Second by Alan. Any further discussion? Since we've lost Ann, we're now at an in-person meeting, so all in favor?
Aye.
All right, unanimous. Thank you. All right, that gets through the general fund capital outlay.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. The
Chief, you don't want to stay for water?
water and sewer? All right, what's the first water item? I don't have that one in front of me.
Water utility truck?
Sorry. A water utility truck?
That's what I have for water.
Okay. All right, so what we have before us is the water utility truck for $175,000. The proposed funding would be water sewer retained earnings. So I guess it's just water, right? Water separate from sewer.
No, we run one fund, so we should probably call it water sewer retained earnings, but we're getting tired of saying water sewer retained earnings.
Okay.
We're calling it water.
Okay, and then the street sweeper for $331,000, which would also be from water retained earnings.
Correct. And if I could, just two things on those. The street sweeper, which technically we pay for drain maintenance out of the sewer budget anyway, so you could argue that it's a water sewer expense. But last year we bought the sewer vac truck, which would normally have been a water sewer enterprise fund cost. We weren't set up yet. We had to move them because if the sewer vac truck fails, we can't get sewer vac trucks. Street sweepers, if they fail, you can rent them and lease them. So we said we would pay for that out of the general fund last year, which we did, with the idea that the street sweeper would be paid out of water sewer to sort of keep everything whole. But it is a drain maintenance expense, which we do pay for out of water sewer anyway.
Okay. Any discussion on those two items?
Make a motion to approve?
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, all right, thank you. The next one is the water tanks for $14,176,950. That's a very specific amount. And the proposed would be borrowing, and this is also over 30 years, right? And would be
Correct.
paid out of water rates?
Correct, and it would be through the state's revolving fund, which we don't actually have to make a payment on until the project is complete 3 or 4 years from now. That being said, it is replacing our only water towers, another project that has to get done. We've looked at the 30-year cost of 3 different options, and this is the cheapest over the 30-year period, because it's either replace both, replace one and repair one, or repair both. But in the repair both scenario, one's getting replaced in 5 or 6 years anyway, and the other one about 10 or 12 years out. In sort of the middle option, we're still replacing one right off the bat and another one in probably call it 10 or 15 years. Again, my apologies to Capital Outlay, who's heard this 57 million times. But one of the tanks is the late 1950s, the other one is the late 1930s. So they're, the average water tank actually has an estimated life of 80 years. We can't borrow over 80 years. We get a slightly lower rate going through the state revolving fund. It is very flush with cash, and it's not necessarily a competitive grant program. They don't give you money for anything, but it is only for water improvement projects of this nature. So it's not guaranteed, but it's your engineers are working with DEP, and you'll be able to apply for it, because towns only have projects like this come up once in a generation. Nobody looks to build extra water treatment plants or tanks for that reason. So it's not like the park grant we got for the pool, where it's like, who knows, maybe they like the application or maybe they don't.
When will you get the word from DEP, my late esteemed agency, when you get the,
You know how long DEP takes to get back to people and just how bureaucratic they can be, Mr.
Yeah,
Slater. But we
darn
anticipate
bureaucrats.
we anticipate hearing sometime this winter.
okay.
Again, the strongest thing going into an SRF application is town meeting has appropriated the money for the project.
I get it, I mean, I used to work in the wastewater portion of the program many, many moons ago. I mean, the thing is though, is that, you know, they do have limited amounts of money, typically more projects and money, and, you know, they've tended to spend their project money in the past on things like treatment plants and lead removal and, you know, major system improvements or whatever, as opposed to something like this, which is an absolutely necessary project, which I support, by the way. Yeah, but I'm not as convinced that we're gonna be getting money from SRF, you know, in the future. We may not. I mean, that's not to say I don't think we should fund this project. I think we should. I think it really relates more to some of the feelings I have on the water improvement program, you know, lining project we have down the road. But, again, I mean, I think this is an absolutely necessary project.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, we're using Stantec, and they've had conversations with DEP that this is a significant increase or upgrade to our water system. So for
Yeah.
us, whereas we don't run a treatment plant, this is really the single most complicated or most expensive part of our system. If we had a treatment plant, that would be different. If we weren't successful in the first round of the SRF, we would go for the second round, just because it's the best bang for our buck. And
I mean, I get it. I mean, you know, it's not a grant as we used to give in the old days. It's a lower interest loan. So instead of paying 4.5%, maybe you pay 2.5%, which is a significant amount of savings. I think my only point is that I would hesitate on going ahead with the $4.5 million water improvement program until I know for sure this year whether or not I get the SRF funding.
Sure, so a couple things on that. We plan to pause the water lining program when, probably the year prior to the debt service for this hitting, to
Right.
smooth out the rates. If we didn't get the SRF, for some reason, if we weren't able to get loan funding this round, it's gonna get kicked to the next time. So we'd be skipping a year without a need to skip a year.
Mm-hmm.
And then even once we get the funding, it's a couple of years down the road. We're not gonna run out and just say, well, they didn't lend us the money this time, so the hell with it. And even the bond motion is being written in a way that it applies to the
I know
SRF.
that, but I mean, your plan is that, well, under SRF, you know, we don't actually have to pay any debt service until the project is completed. So
Correct.
let's assume it's not finished, and I'm just making years up in FY '27. Okay? Your proposal initially was beginning in that year, maybe for a couple of years, we pause the water improvement program.
Correct.
You know, because we're paying off the debt service related.
Right, to absorb,
this.
to have
Right,
a
and
more
that's-
smooth of a rate.
Right, and that's sort of what I'm saying is, you know, we know we're gonna have debt service associated with the water tanks, but we don't know whether we're gonna be getting the benefit of the SRF, meaning we can put it off a couple of years. So therefore, it almost appears to me that maybe we should defer the water improvement program for a couple of years, using the same logic you did to defer it, assuming we do get the SRF.
Yeah, I get that won't work, because then we'd be doing 6 or 7 years of deferment to the water program, which is effectively stopping it. Because if we say, let's wait 2 or 3 years to figure it out, and then we get into the SRF, and we're into the SRF program, and then we're waiting a few years, that's when we want to stop it. So the idea is a year before that SRF payment is due, that's the year to stop. Not now, because the year before and the year that happens, we're not gonna do a water lining project. So
Right.
if we stop this year and next year, the plan was to stop the next 2 years. I don't wanna do the water lining and pay the SRF bond in the same year, because you're probably looking at an 8 or 9% increase in that year just for the capital
Well,
projects.
that's-
We're trying to smooth it out.
Well, that's exactly my point, is that if we do the water project, the tank project, we don't get SRF, and then we do the water improvement project, then we are paying both of those off in the same fiscal year.
No, we would wait and go for a second round of the SRF. The long-term savings by doing the SRF, by being able to delay having to pay it, is worth far more than just
So
the
you
interest
would,
percent
so you would
savings.
defer, you know, the construction of the water tanks,
Yeah.
even though
Not
there
having
could
to
be an
pay that
increase
debt
in
service for
cost?
5 years is, when you adjust for the time value of money, is a significant savings to the ratepayer over time.
I'm not,
This is not one we would just run out and do.
well, I'm not disagreeing.
Because there's so much money on the line. by
I'm not
going through the
disagreeing with the
SRF.
logic of applying
But
for
the
a
14
SRF and
million
maybe
we
trying it down the road again if you don't get it the first
Possibly.
time. My only point is whether we should proceed with the lining project
I think we
at
do,
the same time.
I think we do this year again, because we're gonna have to wait to hear about, and that's what we hear about the SRF.
Yeah.
That's when we'd be going out to bid, and construction won't even fully start on this project. We'll be
Yeah.
done with the next segment of the annual lining program.
Okay, all right.
Is,
Are we ready for a
is,
motion?
yes.
Can I make a motion to approve the design and replacement of the water tanks using borrowing?
I second it.
And just to be clear, this is borrowing that would be paid for out of rates.
Yes.
Sorry, I.
No, that's okay. I just clarifying that. All right.
You can attach it to the general fund if you want, but
Nope.
that defeats the purpose of everything we've been trying to do.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. All right, then there is the water improvement borrowing program, borrowing for $4.5 million, which would be borrowed out of rates. And then similarly, the water main cleaning and lining, but that's the MWRA
Correct.
grant
It's a
loan, which
10-year,
is a
zero
Yeah.
interest.
10%, 10-year zero interest.
Please don't make Tony bring another pipe in here to show us what it did.
No.
He really likes to do
degraded
that.
pipe.
Oh, I bring-
I've seen it already 4 or 5 times.
I bring it to me, you know, like I said, Jack Taylor's my favorite person. Totally innocently just asked a question about it last year, and that was my in.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
not
we
do that.
We don't have all wooden pipes in the system, do we, like we used to in the city of Boston? I've seen some of those, boy, and
I
Could be
have a
some on the
former
Pond
selectman-
Street still
It
left,
could be.
you don't know.
What?
I have a former selectman who used
Hos-
to tell me that
with the
pipes
Hos
can last
Bridge.
200 years, and we don't need
Yeah.
to replace them, but no, I don't think we have any.
All right. Are we okay with making a motion on those two items together?
Yes,
All right, someone want to make a motion?
so moved.
And second? All right, Sarah seconds. Alan, are you, so this motion is to approve the water improvement program borrowing for 4.5 million out of our borrowing for paid out of rates, and also the water main cleaning and lining to MWRA for 630,000, borrowing at 0% interest. All right.
I understand.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
All right, that passes 3-1.
3-1.
Thank you. All right, does that get us through capital outlay?
I think so.
All right, guys, it only took 2 hours and we're through item 3.
All right.
Just saying.
I know. All right. Actually, is there any interest in a motion for a brief recess?
I'll mo-
I
what?
will second Sarah's motion. I have to go to the bathroom.
Me too. Okay. All right, all in favor of a brief recess?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we'll be right back. Call the meeting back to order. Thank you very much. Okay, now we have several other items that are funding items for special town meeting. The first one is a public safety staffing study. All right, it's after 9 p.m. and I managed to
Do we
say
wanna
that.
look, oh, we're gonna do the tip after, that's fine, okay.
Yeah. So that is $60,000 is the proposal for
Yeah,
that.
Just a third-party public safety staffing study. We have not looked at it since 2011. Best practice is to just have a outside third party come in and look at staffing operations and public safety.
Okay.
Is there going to be any, not that I wanna be on it, but I was on the 2011 one, is there gonna be any kind of committee or group, oversees the work, or is it gonna be simply the selectmen?
It'll likely be the selectman and really the consultant that ends up getting hired, because it's looking at what's needed based on what's there. We're not looking at a change in service, at least a fundamental change in service, like when we went to an ambulance service or we went to an ALS service. So I don't know that there'd be a part of it.
Okay.
Is there a motion on a recommendation for this?
I make a motion to recommend that we support the public safety staffing funding for $60,000.
Okay, Sarah, second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. All right. The next one is the opioid settlement language. I don't know, do we actually need
There's no
to?
money associated with that.
Right, is there?
There's $150,000.
We get that, or we have to pay it.
We get that.
Yeah,
We just have to.
I approve.
Well, we have to appropriate it. Okay, so we are making an appropriation, so then FinCom does
Right.
need to make a motion.
Correct. You go through the yellow sheet as a.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I was looking at the pink sheet.
And our agenda followed the followed the warrant, which is why we're following that. Okay. Is there a motion on the opioid settlement language?
Motion to approve?
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Sarah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay. Appropriating the FY23 meter funds for meter replacement. It seems like this is mostly a housekeeping item, right?
Please do this so former
Yes.
This is the
to
last
get it all
time
right.
moderator Hearn does not bring this up
Well,
in
we're asking to
town
stay
meeting.
home for town meeting, but this will be
No,
the
no,
last
no.
time it comes up on a warrant. We've settled it. It's in this following article, adjust the water and sewer budget to account for it. So going forward, if the meter rate changes, that number in the budget will just go up or down based on what the meter is. We never need to talk about it again.
And everyone gets a new meter, everyone's a happy little camper, you
It's
know.
gonna take us 50 million years at the rate we're getting
Okay.
into, but yes, this is money for meters that will get spent on meters.
Okay, cool. And okay, great. I mean, the concern, I joke about because
Believe me,
the concern is legitimate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sarah, did you have something?
I was just gonna say motion to approve.
All right.
Second.
Second by Kelly. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay. Let's see. The adjusting budget for the. Do we need to do something on our Article 12?
You could endorse it. It's technically a change to the water sewer budget, but this puts in an expense line for water meters for the current fiscal year that will be there in the future. We didn't include it last time because we're trying to figure out what the meter rate's gonna be. Our water study's still not done, so.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
All right, thank you,
Second.
Kelly. Seconded by Sarah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay. The curbside composting pilot program for $150,000 from free cash, right?
Yep.
I don't have a problem with this. It just seems like it's $3,000 a participant. How will we ever scale this?
No, it's not 3,000, you know, I'm a customer of the company right now, and the top rate for a private customer would be $230 a year. If you have 500 participants, would be well less than that.
So I just did the math out. Maybe I did my math
So,
wrong.
but just to explain a little further, some of that money is not.
$300 a year.
Yeah.
$300 a year. Okay.
And the reason, well, it did not get calculated, we also would hope that in the period of the pilot, we'd be able to scale it up. And
Fair.
the 150 will allow us.
Fair. I did the math wrong and added a zero. It's actually $300 a person, which is way more reasonable.
And that 300 also includes the purchase of carts, other equipment, and we'll work with the company for marketing
Awesome.
purposes as well.
Cool.
And opportunity to scale up. very-
Cool.
Motion to approve.
Second?
All right. Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous? All right.
Aye.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Aye.
keep it in a second. Yep. All right. The next item is the school, starting with the school department request. The first one is the search for the new superintendent of schools.
Yep.
Teresa Stewart is joining us remotely. Thank you, Teresa, for your patience with us. At the previous meeting, there had been a question about the proposed budget and where those numbers came from. I understand that subsequent to the original request from the school committee for $60,000, then the school committee voted not to do site visits as part of the superintendent search, which may reduce the cost a little bit. Teresa, did you want
Yeah, sure, Maya, correct. So we initially were seeking 60,000. That was a recommendation that came from MASC. I did share some information with Maya and Alan that I assume you all saw that kind of broke down the costs that MASC told us to budget for. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Oh, okay. And because the majority of the school committee decided that we're not going to do site visits for finalists, we can safely reduce that by at least 10,000 because the $10,000 of it we were told to budget if we were going to be doing site visits.
I mean, it's really 6 of one, half dozen another, because they already said in the warrant that any money they didn't use was going to be returned to free cash anyway. So
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter.
Well, that's true, but having said that, and again, I'd like to thank Teresa for sending us that information. My thought is that we should go with something less, with a clear understanding and a commitment to the school committee that if we do appropriate less and you do need more, then we'd be more than willing to support you with the reserve fund transfer if that's what's required, so you wouldn't have to eat into your budget, you know, to make up any associated revenues.
Or wait to go back to town meeting.
Right.
Yeah. So, Alan, did you want to make a motion?
I would make a motion for 30,000, with the understanding that if the school department does need any more money, we'd be more than willing to support, you know, any costs with our reserve fund.
I think this is a critical position for the schools and something that's gonna set our organization up for success. I don't think shorting $20,000 makes a material difference in the budget. If the schools are telling us they're asking for $50,000, I say we support it and they return what's left. I trust them as the experts in this to be able to give us accurate numbers.
I think the numbers we're looking at are a little over $10,000 for the consultant fee. And then there are fees for travel expenses, potentially for candidates. Particularly, we have had some out-of-state candidates apply to some higher-level administration positions in the schools, and MASC is telling us that it is possible to get out-of-state candidates, so we might be paying some travel expenses, and then legal expenses and advertising expenses and things like that. All right, Alan made a motion, we haven't seconded it yet, is there, and then Kelly made an argument to go up to 50. Is there interest in splitting the difference and making a motion for 40?
Could I make a friendly amendment to $40,000?
Sure.
All right, you want to just make a motion for 40 and then you can second? I don't remember exactly how it's
I'll
supposed to
make a
work.
motion to approve $40,000 for the search for the new superintendent of schools, with the understanding that the school committee can come back to us for a reserve fund transfer, or I'm not sure how that mechanism works, sorry.
Yeah.
Reserve fund transfer if additional funds are needed.
I will second that.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
No.
Aye. All right, motion carries 3-1. All right, the next item is the comprehensive review of the school department student services, and this is for the amount of $60,000. Is there a motion on this one?
So moved.
Thank you, Alan. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kelly. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, motion carries. Sorry, unanimous. All right.
Could I ask for clarification, just so I can share with the rest of my committee? What does that mean we can come back for a reserve fund transfer? Because until we get candidates, we won't know. And in December and January, things move pretty quickly. So we come to a FinCom meeting. Could you just describe to me what that would look like?
Sure. No, that's a really good question. So, yes, you would just need to come to our next FinCom meeting after you discovered the issue. We would be looking for documentation of what had already been spent. And then the reserve fund, I believe, stands at $175,000 that FinCom can appropriate in small amounts for short-term needs, unexpected needs. So, which not without having to go back to town meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you. And then the next item is Article 16, the Social Emotional Enrichment Pilot Program for an amount of $50,000. Is there a motion on this?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. The next item is the Extended Day Revolving Fund, which is not exactly a school. It doesn't involve appropriating any money, and it is not a school thing per se, but the schools are involved because currently the schools manage the extended day program. It is a completely self-funded program, but it is falls under the jurisdiction of the school committee and the superintendent, and that is not typically how these programs are run. Norwood is unique in that way, so the proposal is to eventually work to move this program to the rec department.
Correct.
And that means that they could no longer use the same revolving fund that the school department's using, so they need to establish a new one.
Correct. There'll be a follow-up in May at town meeting, assuming this goes forward. to sort of finish this process. We just have to start now because what we do in May is for the next fiscal year.
Right.
So it's just at this point, it's very ministerial. And if for some reason we end up not transferring the program over, it's a nothing.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, we'll say seconded by Alan, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, the next one is the big one, the compensated absences fund, right?
Yep.
Correct.
Okay, and the proposal here is $1.5 million of free cash to initially put money in this fund, and the plan would be that this would be used for what the school's line item in their budget is employee separation costs. So that when someone leaves and you need to pay out their remaining vacation time or sometimes their sick time, that this fund is available to do that. So we would remove those expenses from both general government and schools. It would become a shared expense, right?
Correct.
And
And just because the assumption is that's in the next fiscal year budget, we're appropriating it now to be set up.
Yes.
Make the adjustment. So current year costs would still be handled the same way we do with end of the year transfers, but it would be next year. And it isn't just vacation and sick time. So I know sometimes employee separation costs may include something else, but the framework is just sick and vacation time.
okay,
Okay, in an instance where, in a budget for a particular department, there may be $20,000 left in that account, and you need $10,000 for, paying out sick and vacation, et cetera. I assume you'd be using that before you go to the compensated balances.
No, you go to compensated absences because it's supposed to account for all of your sick and
Oh.
vacation time.
And you just
the
take
time
free
is-
cash for the,
Correct. So you'd end up, instead of the end of the
Alright.
year where we're transferring $30,000 to 5 small departments, that money's unspent, it becomes free cash. Or you're
Okay.
appropriating it to cover a loss somewhere else. Normally, we're not moving money out of salary lines
Yeah.
because we don't have it.
so it doesn't really matter which part of money you take it out of, it's all the same thing.
Sure, except that from an operational standpoint and a financial standpoint, this is a better way to do
Yeah,
what we've been doing.
okay.
But so you're gonna front load it with the 1.5 and then you'll have an annual line item that will compensate for it based on what your average is for 10 years or
Correct.
whatever. you
It'll
decide.
take us a couple of years to get there. So
Yeah.
the thought is next year we'd start at maybe $250,000, increase it $50,000
Yeah.
a year. Probably have to recapitalize it in 4 or 5 years, but then we'd be at the point where we're good. There's more than enough money to cover a bad year, and in a good year, the money flows into it, and we'll be good.
Fine.
and this is really about long-term planning and
Well,
like,
we've been cited on our audits as well, like this would be a good
yes, it
fund
was-
to establish.
yes. Teresa?
Yeah, just to share, this has not been something the school committee has discussed or endorsed, that it's coming out of our budget and going into a shared cost. So if the fund is set up, is there the potential that it's just for the municipal side?
You could if you wanted to exclude schools. What that does is it has no net impact on your overall financial performance. And the financial advisors would just look at it as not really being worth doing. There's almost no point. You're either going to do it or you're not going to do it. The goal is to eventually fully fund the liability and to make sure that that it improves your overall budgetary performance. Little less of a concern on the school side because they don't go over the bottom line number. But on the town side, with it broken up between general government and public safety, it can look like it's going over. But a best practice for both budgeting and from an administrative standpoint is to have the compensated absences fund to not have to move money around at the end of the year.
On the school side, there is the line item for employee separation costs, and it is one of those things that has fluctuated from year to year. I don't know that this includes all of the separation costs, but I'm looking at FY20, it was about $45,000, then FY21, it was about $68,000, then in FY22, it was about $93,000. And so I think it's one of those things that fluctuates and is difficult to plan for. So we're hopeful that having this compensated absences fund would relieve some pressure from the schools as well.
Correct. It's also that's not the full amount that gets paid out. I think some gets charged to that line, but we ran the numbers of payouts of sick and vacation time, and it's quite a bit higher than that for the town and the school.
Yeah.
So just to be clear though, the school committee has not discussed this, and this is not the recommendation of Dr. Thompson, nor Ms. Sheridan, nor our budget subcommittee. And I'm a little caught off guard with what I'm hearing tonight, with how I thought this was being on the warrant and where we were in this discussion. And we have never been audited or had a finding by DESI or on this matter. The schools are not doing anything wrong.
No, this is supposed to help smooth out some inconsistencies that happen from year to year. Because when a long-term employee retires, you suddenly have a big expense. And so this is meant to be like, all right, let's remove that uncertainty from everybody's budget so that you have an easier path to pay this.
Correct, and from a liability standpoint, Teresa, on our books, so the audit that determines our credit rating for any borrowing that we do, we have a liability for the total value of sick and vacation time for all employees. And from a financial standpoint, they don't give a crap if it's a light department employee or a school employee. It's if everyone quit tomorrow, you would owe $2.7 million in vacation and sick time. Having a compensated absences fund counts against that liability, so it appears that your liabilities on the books are actually going down. Nobody's done anything wrong. Every town in America has, every organization has a compensated absences liability. It has to do with the general audit and showing a liability that we can, over time, eliminate from our books, which helps with credit rating and our overall financial performance, as well as fiscal stability.
But I also want to say that the timing of this is a little awkward, but the Budget Balancing Committee is meeting on Monday, and this item is on the agenda for the opportunity for all three boards to talk about how this would work at the Budget Balancing meeting on Monday.
So that would have been wonderful to know before I had a 3.5-hour budget subcommittee today. And the BBC agenda was not given to anybody. The schools did not know we were expected to come prepared to talk about this on Monday. I already gave Matt Lane the items that we were prepared to talk about. But I just really have to reiterate, you're not going to get the support on the town meeting floor from the school committee on this at this time. It is not the recommendation of our business manager. It is not how other districts do it. We have to be really careful of end of year reporting, which continues to be like a pain point in getting the town side to understand. And I see zero reason from the school side that we should do this for us.
It is definitely an important part of the end of year report that the schools do have to report out what the employee separation costs are. Yes, that's definitely true.
It's all coded in the accounting system. The coding doesn't change, so that's still easy information to pull.
Can I make a motion? It sounds like there is some surprise by the school committee. We can establish this fund without having the schools be part of it at first. Can we separate those two things right now and say we are voting on this for the government and municipal employees, and then you guys can talk in budget balancing about how it's going to work with the schools? Because I don't think this is the proper forum to hash this out.
No, I agree.
First of all, there's only one representative from school committee here. The rest of the board isn't here, and we're not the people to make this decision. It should be with all three boards together, which is at BBC. Right. So my recommendation is we move forward with voting on the concept of the fund to create it based on this. And then you guys have a conversation, budget balancing, as to how the schools will participate in that.
I mean, again, the intent, and, the intent really was to help both the town budget and the school budget out. I mean, there wasn't any, any kind of, thought that, there's something being done wrong either on the town side or the school side. It was clearly to help your budget and the town budget, having some of these unexpected expenses. Maybe it just wasn't explained properly, that's the case, and that's something, that we have to answer for. But the intent was really to help out the school budget as well as to help out the town budget. I mean, in terms of Kelly's motion, if she'd like to make that motion, I suppose you could, and we can discuss it further in budget balancing, and have, all three boards, discuss it. But again, the intent was really to help everybody out.
I agree. I totally agree with Alan. That's absolutely intent. It just seems like there's some surprise from Teresa, who's joining this meeting. So I don't want to vote on something for her since she's not comfortable with this because she doesn't really understand the mechanism as how this is going to work. So I feel comfortable moving forward with approving the fund, and then you guys can work out the details of who's going to participate and how that's going to work. But I don't think this is the forum to figure that out.
So the question is, I think that's a good idea if that is something that can be done. Can we establish a compensated absences fund for?
Sure. Listen, it would make my life easier because at the end of the year when we're trying to figure out end of year transfers and I got to find $1,200 for somebody's vacation payout, our lives are made easier. The administrative overhead that it takes and the time that it takes is not worth the time we have to spend on it. We can certainly do that. We have to adjust the numbers. You'll get less of that benefit in terms of offsetting the liability. If the liability town-wide is $3 million, I don't know if we get there just by putting in enough for the town. You might only put in $500,000. So there's still a benefit. Believe me, this is especially because we don't have the bottom line budget authority. There's a lot of administrative work that sometimes goes into a small amount of transfers at the end of the year.
So you would propose if we do it, that we reduce the amount of money that we put in?
Well, correct, but I don't know if we're ready to figure out the amount tonight, and I don't know if we're saying we're only doing the town. I think maybe to Kelly's point, you can endorse the concept and the details can get worked out, and then if we have to make a change on the floor at town meeting, if everyone goes in with an understanding of that, we make the change then.
We can also vote, we can improve the concept and then just vote on the amount. If it ends up working out that it's 1.5 million and Teresa ends up feeling comfortable, we can vote on that, right? But we can have an open meeting right before town meeting.
Right,
to vote
right,
on
which
it.
we were gonna do anyway.
Right, we're gonna
Yeah.
do that anyway. So I don't wanna do anything that, everyone's not comfortable with, it doesn't feel like they have the full information on, but I do think the concept is good. So I think we wanna set it up. It's just how that's gonna work and who's gonna participate in it.
Right, so
If that's
I'll
fair.
entertain a motion to set up this fund and fund it at $1.5 million. And then with the understanding that we will revisit immediately before town meeting when we convene our FinCom meeting
So
then.
moved. That
Okay,
was a much
second.
better way to make my
Second.
long-winded
All right.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, unanimous. Thank you. Let's see. The appropriation for the override stabilization fund. This is moving $2 million from free cash into override stabilization. Is
Motion
there
to
a-
approve.
Thank you.
Second.
All right.
One point, and I won't belabor it. I just want to make, I'm cool, I want all the money in there, so I'm cool with this. I just want to make sure that under the stipulation that we're going to review it at the end of the year to potentially put more money in based on what's left from free cash.
Yeah, that would be great.
As long as the term is potential.
Yes, that was potential, yep, that was
Okay, because,
potential.
I have some concerns about it, but I get it.
Fair,
I hear you.
or
I hear
or
you.
any stabilization, you could even take out override and just put
I hear you.
stabilization.
I understand, okay.
All right. Did we just have a
Yeah,
motion
we
on that?
motioned and
Thank you.
seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right. Grant for Haas Pool
This is
repairs.
just to
Do we
accept
think we
the
need
money.
to? Yeah.
Correct.
All in favor?
I
Oh, we
motion
should
to-
just make a motion. sorry.
Motion to
Second.
approve, yep.
All right. Motion by Kelly, seconded by Alan. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
I make a motion on the next one, which is unpaid bills.
Okay. Unpaid bills in the amount
Oh,
of
we got them all, we got them all.
$19,036.20.
Motion to approve.
All right.
So, and that is definitely seconded.
All right.
Excuse me, school department food service grant, did we not do
I
that one?
thought we skipped that one.
Oh, did we? Did-
It wasn't on the list.
I didn't have it on my list here.
Yeah, Article 21.
Oh, I
Yeah,
skipped
we
that.
did
I'm sorry.
No, we did
No.
Article 21.
No, we didn't.
No,
we
we
did the
did-
grant.
just 20.
We did the grant for Haas Pool. All right.
Motion to approve the school department food service grant.
Yes.
Seconded.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. All right. Now the unpaid bills. Sarah had motioned. Kelly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
One quick
Okay.
thing before you get to Alan's comment on the TIF, did you want to take a vote on Article 4, which was charging interest on details? That ultimately is technically general fund revenue. It's not significant. It's more to penalize people.
Prevent people from not paying late.
Correct.
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Seconded, third.
All right.
fourth.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay.
All right.
Past 9:30, it's past my bedtime.
The information, I'll be very brief. The information on the TIF is in the yellow sheet, page 6. And page 7, we're dealing with FM Global, which is an existing company located on Route 1. They presently pay approximately $162,000 a year on taxes based on the current assessment. That number will not go down. If this project is built, we expect to see an additional tax of over $35 million. That's based on property tax. So that, you would get a tax incremental tax incentive of $5.4 million. That's 16.25%. That's consistent with other projects that we've done. The only one that was much higher than that was Moderna, I mean, for obvious reasons at the time. So we will get a delta just on property taxes of approximately $30 million over a 20-year period. Again, just based on the proposed incentive. In terms of personal property, there will be no TIF on personal property. That will all go into the general fund. That's about $11 million. So all in all, when everything is said and done, if this project comes to fruition, we expect to get, with the TIF, over a 20-year period, approximately $40 million into the town coffers.
Can I
as
ask-
tax revenue.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
Why does the personal property go down? Is that just the value of the equipment on site?
Just depreciation.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we assumed a small increase in the tax assessment every year. Could be a little higher, could be a little
Sure.
lower. That was just a reasonable average.
Totally fair,
Yeah, okay. So, the Economic Development Commission has approved this unanimously. I believe the selectmen did also, as I recall.
Yes.
Okay. So
Sarah,
I think
did you have a
even though FinCom doesn't have to approve this, I think it's always good to go in with FinCom approval if that's the will of the body.
Alan, if this is, if they build this project, you said they're paying 162 right now
Yeah.
in tax revenue. If I'm reading this correctly, it's gonna go up by almost $1 million even with the incentive.
Absolutely.
Okay,
The
that's,
building.
I think that's an important, you
Right.
talked 30 million over 20 years,
Yeah.
but I think the yearly increase is
Oh,
significant. So I
absolutely.
think with the TIF in place.
And it's
so
gonna
I
be a
think that's
fantastic building. This is gonna be really
Their flagship.
the flagship, their training facility for everyone. You have 4 Points right next door
Right,
to them.
yeah.
The amount of money, in addition to the tax revenue, we're gonna get additional hotel tax, meals tax, et cetera, et cetera. So-
And they
6 point-
spoke to some
It's a tremendous
employees
project.
as well, correct?
Yeah.
Wasn't it an additional 50 employees, if I remember
An
correct?
an
can't
additional
remember.
50 employees, and also that they're rehabbing the old analog device
Correct, up on the-
building, that'll service that personnel while this building is being built. Another $50 million there, which they're not asking for anything for, so,
Okay.
again, great project.
Love it.
$6.4 million in building permit. That's
Have
what's
they
up
already
to.
paid it?
They paid the first portion of it.
So the project's happening, that's why I'm asking.
I would say yes.
Okay.
They're, and at Alan's point, they're building 3 flagship facilities around the world: Singapore, London, and Norway.
Motion
Not
to
only
approve.
original Hollywood. Look at this.
Yeah,
Motion to approve.
Second.
we're pretty much
All
a
right.
global city.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
All right. Next item on our agenda is to review and discuss the draft pink sheets. Tony printed them, he had sent them to us. Do we have any, obviously this needs to be adjusted for what we voted tonight.
Yep.
I would prefer to see the capital articles called out
Individually.
individually.
Yes. Superintendent
By
search.
fund,
has to
sorry,
be-
by funding source or by individual project?
Individual project.
Okay.
I think the fact that we, decided to vote certain ones down, I think lends to having individual projects.
Want to be individual project and funding source?
And funding source as well,
Yeah.
right, but I thought Tony was suggesting that they were
Okay.
grouped by funding source. And I think this table down at the bottom, it could just be, a line across the top that says like what the starting balance is, and then a line at the bottom, which is what the ending balance is. That's typically how we do this for pink sheets, I believe.
Yeah, the other
So-
thing I'd like to see is like the $6 million that we want to allocate for free space. Do we want to like indicate that that's still earmarked so that town meeting sees that?
We can. I can
Do we
probably
want
find a
to?
way.
I mean, I'm asking because that was something that they asked for, so do we
I'd
want
hurt
to
to remind town meeting.
Well, I
members
also
what-
think maybe if we can find a way to get it on the pink sheet, great. If we can't find a way to get it
Let's
on the
speak
pink
to it.
sheet, I can definitely include it in our
Rock on.
presentation.
Rock on.
Yeah,
Cool.
Right.
And then just my other comment is the numbers. The numbers need to be fixed.
right.
No, I shouldn't say fixed. I should say updated.
Right. Um, so I believe Deborah is prepared to prepare pink sheets to get them out to everyone, but I don't know if those would be ready tomorrow morning or if that might have to wait till Monday.
Tomorrow afternoon would be better. We can probably update this and make the changes we need by the afternoon. I just got a couple things in the morning.
So maybe what makes sense then is you can send it to me in the afternoon, I'll double check it, and then Deborah can print them on Monday.
Cool.
Yeah.
One of the things we've been doing the last year or so is when we're ready with a document, we send it out electronically around when we
Yeah.
mail it out. So some people will have it, and we get it up on the website. So as long as there's this is good to go, we can get it out electronically, get it on the website. The mailing is just gonna take a couple more days.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I'd like to get it to as many town meeting members as we could, a week before. If it goes Monday, that's a week.
Yeah. Okay. So I will make sure that I check the pink sheet tomorrow unless somebody else wants to take that responsibility.
I don't like pink.
Okay. I'll take care of that then. What was the next item on our agenda?
Is Ann Haley the FinCom liaison to the school department?
Yes.
And so she's
yeah,
gone.
and I had just put this in there as an opportunity in case she wanted to speak to this.
Indefinite postponement.
Yes. Discussion about the FinCom presentation for town meeting. I apologize to everyone. I didn't get you guys a draft until today. And obviously I need to include a lot more detail about, based on what we said tonight. But I was looking for if anybody has feedback on that. Either you can share it now or feel free to send me an email and make suggestions for edits to that presentation.
And I may send you something over the weekend, so
Yep.
if I have anything.
Okay, that sounds good.
That seems more, yes.
Okay, then review of long-term agenda. One thing I'm a little concerned about, well, let's see, first of all, town meeting starts at 6:30 on Monday, the 13th.
Yes,
So should we post a FinCom meeting for 5:30?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll do that. And then it took us, we've been here for more than 2.5 hours. And we didn't actually talk about all the things that were on the special town meeting warrant, right? Because there's like the PBCC stuff and the electronic voting stuff and stuff like that. So do we think that town meeting will be over in one night? And so, because right now we have a meeting scheduled for Thursday the 16th.
Yeah.
But we had said we might need to adjust that if we think that town meeting extends to a second night. We had talked about maybe adjusting the time. Just want to throw it out there, see if others have thoughts on this.
I'm happy to meet before town meeting if
probably
you would
makes
like
sense.
to. I don't know how that
I
works
actually
with
probably
work
can't.
schedules.
I could do that easily.
Okay, all right, so let's leave it as is, and then on Tuesday, the 14th, we will post whatever the time is gonna
Does
be.
it work with your schedule?
I can
Work
make it
schedule?
work, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right,
I'll speak to the moderator to try to move up,
You might have
Town
some
meeting.
swing there.
not really.
I was gonna say maybe don't speak to the moderator. I think-
Why don't we have
Take care
Sarah
of it
talk
just
to her?
fine.
Yeah, she may listen
Nope,
to
I
you
think,
more.
I think we
Sarah,
leave the
take care of
moderator alone.
Yeah.
She's got a
Um,
gavel.
all right. Any other topics for discussion that anybody wants to bring up?
No.
Okay, then this is our review of action items. Write a letter to the Board of Selectmen about the no borrowing next year.
Was it also about changing to 20 years, or no? Changing the,
I can send them a memo on these are the results of the FinCom's.
Okay,
meeting and-
okay.
Thank you, Tony.
Include the $6 million from Forbes in our presentation, and check the pink sheets tomorrow. Did we have any other action items that I missed?
The presentation for town meeting.
Yeah, I already knew that one, but yes, I should
We
add
just
that.
make them my list of action items.
Make presentation. I started it.
I don't
Getting
know,
there.
no, I'm just saying, I just feel bad.
It's all right. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
Thank you,
very much.
everyone.
That was really good discussion.
It was a
I know